it's really been hurting me and killing me, tearing me up on the inside. Every day I look at my scars.
Your friend guilty of lying to cover up the death of a 26-year-old man.
They thought they'd heard it all, until the judge spoke. Some broke down, some lashed out, and some showed no emotion at all. From life stretched hundreds of years, to punishments that shocked entire courtrooms. These are 68 of the craziest sentences of all time. And trust me, number 42 will leave you stunned.
Help! I know my husband was shot. I need help.
Okay, stay on the line with me.
New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2018. An Army sergeant lies dead in his father's driveway, shot multiple times. His wife called an emergency, crying for help. But behind her tears, a shocking secret waits to be revealed in court. Army Sergeant Tyrone Hassel III, a dedicated soldier, was home for the holidays with his wife, Camilla, and their young son. Tyrone had enlisted in the Army to build a better life and had quickly risen through the ranks. He met Camilla in 2015 while stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. They married, had a child, and appeared to be a typical military family. But beneath the surface, a dark secret was brewing. In the quiet residential streets of St. Joseph Township, Michigan, chaos erupted as Tyrone was gunned down in the driveway, and his wife, Camilla Hassel, frantically made a panicked emergency call. Officers arrived to find her emotionally distraught. She told them she had been inside with their son while her husband attended a party. Everything seemed to point to a mournful act of conflict by an unknown assailant. But investigators noticed inconsistencies in Camilla's story. The St. Joseph Township Police and the Army Criminal Investigation Division launched a full-scale investigation. They found a neighbor had seen a man leave in a black car right after the shooting. 11 days later, an anonymous tip changed everything. Camilla was having an affair with another soldier, Jeremy Cuellar. Investigators learned Cuellar had said Sergeant Hassel had to go. Cell phone records and witness testimonies linked Cuellar to the murder. Investigators found guns he had purchased, including one matching the caliber used in the shooting. Cuellar was placed under surveillance and arrested. Camilla initially denied any involvement, but after multiple interviews and a polygraph test, she confessed. She had plotted her husband's murder with Cuellar. Camilla admitted that she and Cuellar orchestrated the plan to kill Tyrone, motivated by their secret affair and financial gain from Army benefits. She had played the grieving wife perfectly, but the truth came out. Camilla Hassel was arrested on January 12th, the day of her husband's funeral. Cuellar faced charges as well. In July 2019, Camilla was guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and conspiracy. By August 29th, 2019, she was sentenced to life without parole.
Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder as aider or abettor.
Thank you. And as to count 2?
Guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree premeditated murder.
However, she showed no emotion for her actions. On the other hand, Cuellar gets 65 years in prison. The Hassel family said they were in shock. The betrayal cut deep, leaving a family grieving not just a son, but a future stolen by lies and deceit. A soldier betrayed by his wife. But our next case is even darker, where an Army sergeant stood accused of killing his own family.
I am an innocent man. I can no longer sit back and be railroaded and slandered. I have chosen to give this one interview and one interview only.
A decorated Army sergeant, 2 innocent women, and a child who witnessed a nightmare no one should ever see. The question is, did Sergeant Brent Burke commit these murders, or was he set up? Sergeant Brent Burke served at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the legendary 101st Airborne. He had earned respect as a soldier, but in 2007, his life would take a dark turn. That September, his wife Tracy Burke and her mother, Karen Comer, were found dead in their Kentucky home. 3 young children were left inside. The children were the only witnesses. 9-year-old Matthew Pete called the emergency in shock.
911. Somebody broke into our house last night, and I don't know who it was, but they killed everybody here except for my sister, my brother, and me.
His younger siblings, 4-year-old Ian and 2-year-old Reagan, had seen the horror unfold. The authorities had one suspect, Brent Burke, Tracy's husband. But here's the twist. There was no murder weapon, no blood, no DNA linking him to the crime. Nothing except circumstantial evidence. Police investigated. They interviewed the children. Matthew described a camouflage jacket. Ian said, "You want to talk to me about my daddy shooting my mommy." But no jacket was found, no weapon, and Brent claimed he was innocent. Defense attorneys pointed out gaps. The drive from Fort Campbell to Rineyville was long. Could someone kill two people, leave no evidence, and return to barracks without being noticed? Burke's case eventually went to trial, but it quickly turned into a legal roller coaster. 4 separate civilian trials ended in mistrials. Key witnesses fell ill, and at one point, a 14-year-old falsely confessed, further muddying the waters. Tracy and Brent were divorcing. The marriage had grown tense. Jealousy and control issues were suspected. But was that enough for killing? The defense said no. The prosecution said yes. Despite multiple trials, the case remained controversial. Some believed Brent was guilty. Others argued the evidence never added up. The courtroom battles were long and complicated, leaving the families desperate for closure. Military prosecutors believed they could finally secure a conviction, but the absence of direct evidence made it an uphill battle. As the case dragged on, the Army's Judge Advocate General, or JAG, stepped in to take over. Each setback made the prosecution's path more difficult, and even key witnesses faltered. One admitted on the stand,
Heard approximately 4 or 5 gunshots, I do not recall.
In the end, Brent Burke's uniform was stripped away. A military court sentenced him to life without parole, demoted, disgraced, and dishonorably discharged. Yet he remained motionless as the sentence was read. This is Sergeant Brent Burke's story, a soldier, a father, and a man caught in a web of tragedy, suspicion, and unresolved questions. Mistrials left the courtroom in chaos and the soldier in disgrace. But in our next case, there was no confusion at all. When a National Guardsman opened fire, the victims were police officers themselves.
I went to the door, and I thought it was Brooklyn coming back. As soon as I opened the door, standing in front of me is an officer. Me and the officer, we make eye contact.
The courtroom was silent as the jury returned. Then came the verdict. Grady Wilkes, guilty of capital murder. 1 Auburn police officer was killed, 2 more were wounded, and the man behind it all wasn't just anyone. He was a trained soldier in the U.S. Army National Guard. On May 19, 2019, Auburn police responded to a call at a mobile home park on Wire Road. The victim, Brooklyn Flaherty, told officers that her boyfriend, 29-year-old Grady Wilkes, had attacked her. She said he grabbed her by the wrist, choked her, and threatened to kill her. Terrified, she ran for help. What officers didn't know was that Wilkes was already arming himself inside the home. After speaking with Flaherty, 4 officers went back to the trailer to confront Wilkes. Officer William Buechner, officers Evan Elliott, Mark Sistrunk, and Ron Askelson. They knocked on the door, bracing for a tense exchange. Instead, what followed was a nightmare. Wilkes opened the door wearing body armor and carrying a rifle. Without warning, he started shooting. Officer Buechner was struck and rushed to East Alabama Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. Officers Sistrunk and Elliott were critically wounded, but survived. Officer Askelson narrowly escaped. A massive manhunt began, keeping the community on edge for 9 long hours. Finally, Wilkes was arrested. At the time, he was not just a civilian. He was a corporal in the Alabama Army National Guard, a trained infantry fire team leader who had joined in 2010. During the trial, Wilkes testified in his defense. He admitted drinking, spiraling mentally, and arming himself out of muscle memory. He claimed he believed officers had their guns aimed at him when he opened fire. Wilkes' words painted a disturbing picture. He described how putting on his military gear made him feel safe and powerful, almost detached from the chaos of life. A psychiatrist testified, suggesting that he might be suffering from bipolar disorder, stating,
based on the evidence that I had, that he had a bipolar disorder.
But that detachment turned deadly. What began as a household fight escalated into the cold-blooded murder of a police officer. In August 2023, after an 8-day trial and 6 hours of jury deliberation, Gary Wilkes was found guilty of capital murder for killing Officer Buechner and guilty of attempting murder for wounding Officers Elliott and Sistrunk.
We, the jury, find defendant Grady Wayne Wilkes guilty of capital murder as charged in count 1 of the indictment.
He was acquitted of the charge involving Officer Askelson. Prosecutors immediately announced they would seek the death penalty, setting the stage for a final chapter in a case that had left a community shaken to its core. 1 officer dead, 2 wounded, a community scarred by a soldier's rage. Our next case hits even closer to home, where a husband turned his wife's birthday celebration into a scene of horror.
You've admitted that to the jury because your thing was, it's not who, it's not what, when, all this other stuff, it's the why.
It was supposed to be a celebration, a birthday party for Ashley Henning, but the night turned deadly. Her husband, Jordan Henning, pulled the trigger, and everything changed. Jordan Michael Henning, 34, shot and killed his wife, Ashley Henning, 37, on June 26, 2023, at their home in Rhineyville. The shocking attack happened during her birthday party. Friends and neighbors were there. Witnesses saw the couple arguing. Moments later, gunshots rang out. The family's nightmare began after a household dispute. Neighbors were leaving with the couple's children. That's when they heard the shots. Jordan walked out of the house. Ashley lay inside with multiple gunshot wounds. Authorities were called immediately. Police confirmed that both Jordan and Ashley were active duty military members stationed at Fort Knox. The Hardin County Sheriff's Office investigated. Body cameras, interviews, and surveillance footage became crucial pieces of evidence. Jordan was arrested and charged with murder. After nearly a year and a half of waiting, the trial finally began. Jury selection alone took 6 hours, narrowing down to 12 jurors and 2 alternates. The courtroom was heavy with tension. Everyone already knew the crime was shocking, but the testimony made it even more disturbing. At one point, a female witness was pressed by the defense on,
Well, and then, ma'am, you're talking verbal abuse. I asked you physical abuse. There was none. Is that your answer?
I already said that. Other than the push of the car door and him grabbing her neck that day, I already stated that.
and asked to refer to the transcripts, unwilling to repeat herself under pressure. Another witness said, when I went into the house to check what was happening,
she was laying on her right side, kind of prone, like she was rolled toward the floor. I felt her neck to see if she had a pulse. I felt none.
The prosecution argued that Jordan was unhappy with his marriage. That's why the shooting stemmed from a household dispute escalating out of control.
Gets another magazine and comes back and stands over her and executes her. And you'll see how he spits on her body as he walks away.
Jordan, once a U.S. Army soldier, now faced the consequences of a life-altering choice. Friends and family called him a disgrace. Jordan Henning was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He lowered his head into his hands as the verdict was delivered, the weight of his choices and their consequences finally sinking in. A marriage argument ending in carnage. But what comes next is even harder to believe. A mother from a respected military background killed her children for being mouthy.
Did you know that you wanted to kill your kids?
No, I was only going to kill me.
Police entered the former military linguist Scheneker's home in Tampa, Florida, and were met with a chilling scene. Teenagers Calix and Bo lay dead, shot and covered with blankets. The person responsible wasn't a stranger. It was their mother, Julie Scheneker. What followed would become a trial no one could forget. The Scheneker family seemed like a typical military household. Julie lived with her husband, U.S. Army Colonel Parker Scheneker, and their 2 children. While Parker was overseas serving his country, Julie was at home with the kids. Calix was cheerful, Bo was athletic, and from the outside, the family looked happy. But behind closed doors, there were signs of trouble. Police had once been called after Calix reported that her mother had hit her, though no charges were filed. Everything unraveled on January 28th, when Julie's mother called the police after being unable to reach her daughter. Officers arrived at the Scheneker home and were met with a chilling scene. In the garage, they found Bo in the family SUV, shot twice in the head. Upstairs, Calix lay in her bedroom, covered by a blanket, also shot with a .38 revolver. Julie herself was found unconscious on the back porch. When questioned, Julie confessed. She admitted she had killed her children.
My daughter, my 16-year-old, It's just mouthy.
A note was also discovered in the house, describing her plan to kill her children and then take her own life. According to investigators, the murders happened step by step. Julie had picked up Beau from soccer practice the day before. While driving home, she shot him in the head. She then went inside and walked straight into Calix's room, where her daughter was doing homework on the computer, and killed her. Both children were then covered in blankets, as if to hide the conflict that had just taken place. The official motive shocked everyone. Julie told detectives that she killed Calix and Beau because she couldn't handle their backtalk. She had even purchased the revolver just 5 days earlier. Her handwritten notes confirmed this was premeditated. Julie was arrested immediately and later indicted for 2 counts of first-degree murder. Her defense team tried to argue insanity, but prosecutors pressed forward. After delays, her trial began in April 2014. On May 15th, the jury found her guilty of killing both her children. She was sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison without the possibility of parole. She got emotional while the verdict was read. She said,
"I'm prepared and I accept your sentence. I apologize. I apologize to everybody in this courtroom who I have broken their lives."
The tragedy tore the Schenecker family apart. Parker, devastated by the loss of his children, divorced Julie while stationed overseas. When the judge asks him,
"Do you wish the court to dissolve the marriage between you and Ms. Schenecker and reserve jurisdiction on all remaining issues in the case?"
Yes, sir.
he later filed a civil lawsuit against her, making sure none of the family's remaining assets could be used for her defense. Our next case involves a teenager whose anger turned lethal. Josiah Hewley murdered his own mother, leaving the courtroom stunned by his lack of remorse.
Possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
It was supposed to be a simple stop for air in his tires, but in just minutes, Bradley Coleman was gunned down by gang members. What followed was a murder trial, a grieving family's emotional plea for justice, and a mournful courtroom outburst that no one expected. Bradley Coleman was only 29 years old. He was a beloved father, a mentor to young athletes, and a man his community respected deeply. On that day in 2022, he stopped at a Gwinnett County gas station. 3 alleged 9 Trey Bloods gang members tried to carjack him. They were known for stealing cars, and this time, their target was Bradley. The confrontation was quick, vicious, and senseless. In front of strangers going about their day, Bradley was shot dead. The investigation moved fast. Prosecutors identified the trio: Josiah Hewley as the shooter, David Booker as armed backup, and Miles Collins as the getaway driver. They had built a reputation for conflict, but this crime crossed a line that could not be ignored. The initial trial in October 2023 ended in a mistrial after the judge ruled that the prosecution made a prejudicial statement that jury instructions could not mitigate. In the retrial, Bradley's family faced the men who killed him. One by one, they poured their hearts out in victim impact statements.
"I hate y'all.
Mr. Coleman.
Look, lock them up and throw away the key. That's it."
His aunt called the killers.
"They hunted my nephew down like a wounded animal and shot him dead for a car. For a car."
And Bradley's mother, through tears, reminded the court of all her son had accomplished. How he was a father, a coach, and a leader. She begged the jury to deliver maximum punishment. The motive was as cold as it gets. These men wanted his car. They weren't willing to work for what they wanted. They decided to take it, and in doing so, they took a man's life. The jury didn't hesitate. All 3 defendants were convicted on every charge. Judge Tamala Adkins then turned to Josiah Hewley and announced,
Possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
And then sentenced each of them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, at least in the courtroom, was served. But even in that moment of justice, pain boiled over. As he was led away, Miles Collins turned to the Coleman family and sneered, "I hope y'all are happy." That taunt ignited fury. Bradley's brother leapt out of his seat, ready to fight, before officers restrained him.
The family of Mr. Coleman. The family of Mr. Coleman.
Outside the courtroom, his mother said,
They were not going to get away with it. They messed with the wrong one.
his killers will spend the rest of their days behind bars, but for his family, the wound of that day will never fully heal. A father, a coach, a leader, gunned down over a car. But our next case brings us to Los Angeles, where the music world was shattered when a rising star was savagely killed.
Find the defendant, Eric Ronald Holder Jr., guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
In a silent Los Angeles courtroom, the jury delivered a verdict that closed one of the darkest chapters in hip-hop history. Eric R. Holder Jr. was found guilty of killing Grammy-nominated rapper Nipsey Hussle, a man who had dedicated his life to lifting the very community where he was gunned down. On March 31st, 2019, Nipsey Hussle stood outside his clothing store, The Marathon, greeting friends and fans. His career was on the rise. His Grammy-nominated album, Victory Lap, had cemented his place in music, and he was deeply invested in giving back to the community where he grew up. That afternoon, a familiar face appeared, Eric Holder, an old acquaintance from the same street gang. What began as a casual conversation soon grew heated. Words were exchanged, voices tightened, and the mood shifted sharply, leaving tension hanging in the air. Holder left the lot, grabbed 2 guns, and came back. He fired at Nipsey, hitting him at least 10 times, then kicked him in the head. 2 bystanders were struck by gunfire. Security footage, witnesses, and Brianita Nicholson, who unknowingly drove him, tied it all together. Nipsey was rushed to the hospital but didn't make it. Soon after, Eric Holder was arrested. The trial revealed chilling details about the day Nipsey Hussle was killed. Prosecutors described a brief, tense conversation between Nipsey and Eric Holder, where Nipsey confronted Holder about rumors he had been cooperating with law enforcement, a serious accusation in the gang world. Holder walked away from the parking lot, but not for long. He stopped along the way to eat a few bites of chili cheese fries. One prosecutor even described it in court.
He needs additional money to pay for a drink or something. He goes back into the Master Burger. He then walks out and walks over to the group again.
Then, almost 9 minutes later, Holder returned calm, deliberate, and armed. He marched back toward Nipsey and opened fire, hitting the rapper at least 10 times before even kicking him in the head. 2 bystanders were also struck in the crossfire. His defense team argued it wasn't premeditated, just a heat of passion, but the jury didn't buy it. They watched the footage, listened to the witnesses, and after just 2 days of deliberation, they found him guilty of first-degree murder. So why did Eric Holder kill Nipsey Hussle? Prosecutors said it was over pride and respect. Nipsey never threatened him. He only urged him to clear up the rumors of being a snitch. But in Holder's mind, those words were enough to spark rage, enough to push him to kill a man admired worldwide. In July 2022, more than 3 years after the shooting, Eric Holder Jr. was convicted of first-degree murder, along with charges of assault and possession of a firearm as a felon. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison, yet as the verdict echoed through the courtroom, he showed no hint of remorse.
The total sentence would be 60 years to life in prison.
Nipsey Hussle's death left a hole in Los Angeles and in the hip-hop world. A rapper admired worldwide, gone in seconds over wounded pride. But another case staggered the entire U.S. as a preacher secretly ordered killings and walked free for decades.
The person who's told the secrets of the past is Edgar Ray Killings.
He sat in the courtroom, calm and composed. A preacher, a man of faith. But decades earlier, he had ordered the killing of 3 young men, and for more than 40 years, the question remained, would justice ever catch him? In the summer of 1964, 3 young men, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, came to Mississippi. Their mission was simple, to help people vote and to stand for equality. But instead of being welcomed, they faced danger. Behind that danger was Edgar Ray Killen, a local minister who also worked as an organizer for the Ku Klux Klan gang. When the 3 activists suddenly disappeared, the whole country began watching. Weeks later, their bodies were discovered, and investigators knew something terrible had been done. Edgar Ray Killen and others were arrested, but the system at the time was resistant. In 1966, a jury could not reach a decision. One juror said she would not convict a preacher. Killen walked free. For decades, families and journalists refused to give up. They pressed for answers, uncovered new evidence, and demanded accountability. Finally, in 2005, 41 years after the crime, Killen was brought back to court. At 80 years old, he appeared frail, but this time, the truth spoke louder. On June 21st, the very anniversary of the murders, he was convicted of manslaughter. Why did it happen?
And I says, so why are you opening up now? He said, well, he says, the right thing to do.
The three young men wanted equal rights and change, but many people didn't want that. Killen brought these people together to stop these young men. Finally, Killen was found guilty of manslaughter.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Edgar Ray Killen, as to count 3, guilty of manslaughter.
Judge Marcus Gordon gave Killen the maximum sentence, 60 years behind bars. 20 for each life he took. No parole, no excuses. Even at 80, justice did not wait. The preacher was sent to prison, showing no regret for his actions. He remained behind bars until he died in 2018 at the age of 93. For the families, it was a long-awaited moment. Not full justice, but a step toward healing. Justice delayed, but not denied. Killen finally died behind bars, and yet, in another courtroom, a gang member faced his own reckoning after killing 2 innocent teenagers in a park.
Do you guys see the pain that I'm going through right now?
The judge's gavel hit the bench, and silence fell. 2 teenagers, enjoying a peaceful evening in the park, were gone in an instant because of a deadly mistake. The courtroom demanded the truth. Robert Alcee Beharan sat accused of murder.
We want so we can have a better, safe community for our kids and for our family.
Just before 10 p.m. on May 3, 2011, gunfire suddenly shattered the peace of the park. Out of nowhere, gunshots echoed through the night. Multiple bullets tore through the air, striking a young couple who had only come out to enjoy the evening. Panic spread instantly, and within seconds, 2 innocent lives were stolen. Witnesses recalled the chaos, saying the couple had been hit multiple times. By the time police arrived, both teens were dead. The investigation revealed the shooter was 21-year-old gang member Robert Alcee Beharan. He claimed he thought the teens were tied to a rival gang that claimed the park. 2 other men, Justin Gibson and Kenneth Dwight Hamilton, were with him. They later pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. A 4th man, Tyrone Blackman, admitted to helping after the crime. Beharan pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder on September 5, 2016 in Vista Superior Court. Prosecutors could have sought the death penalty, but a plea bargain gave him life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, he showed no emotion at his sentence, though he gave a chilling, wicked stare. The killings were completely unprovoked. The teens were innocent victims of gang conflict, and the killer offered no answers, no apology. The families of Sandra and Fernando faced unimaginable grief. Sandra's father said
that he took away this daughter of mine, and he took it away from my heart.
The loss will be forever. She will never be replaced. 2 young lives erased in an instant. But our next case pushes humanity to its darkest limits, where a gang member hunted down a teenager mercilessly.
The case is going to turn on. What was in Mr. Courtier's mind? What were his thoughts?
A young man tried to get away. A gang member chased him. In a tragic moment, the young man lost his life. Now, the court has sentenced Russell Courtier to life in prison. Russell Courtier, a 40-year-old gang member, was sentenced to life in prison for killing 19-year-old Larnell Bruce Jr. in Oregon. He won't be eligible for parole for 28 years. On August 10, 2016, outside a convenience store in Gresham, Oregon, a fight broke out between Courtier and Bruce. The conflict seemed small at first, but it escalated fast. Bruce tried to leave, but Courtier got into a Jeep and chased him down. Surveillance footage later showed Bruce desperately trying to avoid Courtier. Police arrived after receiving a call about a hit and run and found Bruce critically injured. He later died in the hospital. Courtier was not just acting out of anger. Prosecutors revealed he was motivated by prejudice. His membership in the European Kindred Gang came from a desire to be part of a brotherhood, according to the court. The jury found that Courtier treated Bruce unfairly because of his racial background. The judge said,
"And those acts that you've committed have forever changed lots of lives."
In Oregon, intimidation motivated by prejudice is considered a targeted attack. Courtier was found guilty of murder, felony hit and run, and intimidation. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 28 years. However, he chose to remain silent at his sentencing. Courtier's girlfriend, Colleen Hunt, who let him use her Jeep, also pleaded guilty to manslaughter and got 10 years. Bruce's life was cut short because of anger. Justice was served, but the loss remains heartbreaking. One of the family members of the victim said,
"It wasn't until I took the time to realize what he lost too that it made sense to me that..."
Next up, a man who planned a killing with chilling precision. David Parga turned a cold contract into a deadly reality.
To you specifically, I want to say sorry to what happened to your son. I know the pain you're feeling. My mom comes to see me, she cries because what's happening to me, and I could only imagine what you're going through. You lost your son.
On October 29, 2006, 27-year-old Leland Washington was leaving a Halloween party after he had been invited by some of his friends. He was reportedly asked to leave because most of the partygoers were gang members. Washington had returned to the party with a group after he was kicked out. As he was leaving, David Parga, a member of the La Habra street gang, walked up to Leland and shot with a .22 caliber pistol. David had shot him multiple times without any form of provocation. David and his gang felt that Washington was disrespectful to them because he had returned to the party. Leland's friends put him in their car before driving to UCI Medical Center in California, where he was pronounced dead. Leland Washington was one semester away from graduating with an accounting and business administration degree at California State University. He was not in a gang and had no gang affiliations. David Parga was arrested and charged with felony murder. Parga represented himself in court and was found guilty of second-degree murder. During sentencing, Leland Washington's family gave their impact statements in court. Leland's brother talked about how he found the grief of losing his brother too much to handle.
Days that the grief is so much that I just kind of muddle through the day. You have to understand who he was. He was such a great person, and the way that he died, he did not deserve that at all.
Leland's sister also talked about how much emptiness was left behind by her brother's murder. She said, "Halloween weekend will never be the same for us. It's ironic that we are here today to sentence the man who murdered my brother. It is not fair that his life was taken away by a non-productive member of society." Leland Washington's mother told the court that David and Leland may have been friends if they had known each other. She said, "I think if Mr. Parga had ever known him, he couldn't have been anything but a friend to him. He couldn't have found any other way but to make him a friend." Parga was allowed to speak to the victim's family, and he seemed to show remorse for his actions. Parga apologized for senselessly murdering Leland Washington. The judge in his final sentencing called Parga a coward because he had shot Leland for no obvious reason. In 2013, Parga was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison for the murder of 27-year-old Leland Washington. While David Parga apologized and showed remorse for his actions, what do we say about a convict who begs people not to be like him?
The life that we was living, being in gangs and all that other stuff, it ain't worth 16 years or a death, because eventually you be put in a situation, and there's severe consequences that come with that.
This is Tariq Mikel Jackson, who is on trial for murder in Michigan. On July 12, 2015, 16-year-old Tariq Jackson allegedly pulled out a gun and opened fire in public after a fight broke out between rival Ypsilanti gangs in 2015. One of the bullets that Tariq had shot hit 20-year-old Keandre Duff in the head, killing him instantly. Tariq was charged with open murder, armed robbery, receiving and concealing a stolen firearm, 3 counts of felony firearm, and 11 counts of perjury. However, shortly before he was set to go on trial, he confessed to second-degree murder. This murder was not the first time Tariq committed a crime because he had a lengthy criminal history. In 2012, he was placed on probation as a minor for a first-degree home invasion. He was also placed on probation for a third-degree home invasion in August 2014, before being arrested for carrying a concealed weapon a few months later. He was eventually sentenced, and it was an emotional day for everyone there. The mother of the victim gave an impact statement.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because that when our children make these decisions out here.
Keandre Duff's mother blamed the gang culture the men found themselves in. She addressed Tariq directly as she delivered her statement. She said, "Our whole world was turned upside down. Our young men are lost out there. I don't want to see another young man go behind bars." Duff's mother also told Tariq that she forgave him and hoped he found salvation. Keandre Duff had previously been charged with the murder of 17-year-old Keon Washington. The charges against him were later dropped due to a lack of sufficient evidence to charge him. Tariq eventually had his chance to address the court as he apologized for his actions, showing remorse and obvious regret for his actions.
First off, I just want to say sorry to the family of the victim. I wish the situation would have played out like that. I never thought that my choices and decisions would have affected so many people. No mother deserves to bury her son, and no mother deserves to see her son change. My bad choice led to a lose-lose situation for me, my family, and the family of the victim.
Tariq went on to warn other gang members, telling them to learn from him because what they were doing wasn't worth the consequences. He warned his brother and friends who were involved with gangs to stop so they didn't end up like him. Tariq Jackson was sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison for the murder of 20-year-old Keandre Duff. He is currently serving his sentence at the G. Robert Cotton Correctional Facility. Unlike Tariq Jackson, Luis Bracamontes showed no remorse in court. Instead, he vowed to kill again if given the chance.
Be silent. Be silent.
I will break out soon and I will kill more.
On October 24, 2014, Luis Bracamontes, an illegal immigrant from Mexico and substance dealer, murdered 2 police officers and severely injured another in Northern California. Luis fatally shot a sheriff's deputy named Danny Oliver of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department because the officer had been examining Luis's car. After killing Oliver, Luis stole a car and fled to another county where he shot 2 other officers, killing Detective Michael Davis of the Placer County Sheriff's Department. Before he added the brutal murder of these 2 officers to his list, Luis had already gotten on the bad side of the law multiple times. He was an illegal immigrant and had already been deported twice. In 1997, Bracamontes was arrested in Arizona because he had been selling narcotics. The authorities later found out that he was an illegal immigrant and Bracamontes was deported. He was, however, arrested again for selling substances in 1998. Undercover police officers had bought small amounts of illegal substances from Bracamontes before arresting him in Phoenix. He was released only to be arrested and deported to Mexico in 2001. Bracamontes had illegally migrated back to America again, and at the time he committed the murders, he was using the name Marcelo Marquez. After he shot and killed the 2 police officers, Bracamontes went on the run. Luis stole several cars to escape the police, and an extensive manhunt was launched to find him. He was eventually taken into custody, and his court hearings lasted about 4 years, due to his erratic and unpredictable behavior, which will be covered later. The news of the murder became widespread, especially since it had happened around the time that the Obama administration updated immigration policies, which allowed Bracamontes to stay in America that long without being deported. In 2017, Donald Trump invited the widows of the officers Bracamontes murdered to a joint Congress. The motive for this was not revealed until 2018, a week before the midterm elections. Donald Trump's administration ran an ad which linked Bracamontes and the murders to the Democrats. The ad accused Democrats of allowing dangerous immigrants into the United States. This ad was heavily criticized and condemned by both party members across the country. A Republican senator called the ad sickening and said it was a new low in campaigning. Amidst the nationwide outrage over the ad, Bracamontes' hearing had to be rescheduled multiple times until 2018 when he was finally sentenced. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. Luis initially pleaded not guilty, but he could not keep the facade on any longer and revealed his true colors in the courtroom. His actions were despicable.
Ladies and gentlemen, please step out into the hallway.
Dead.
Bracamontes kept on promising to kill more police officers when he broke out of prison as the procedure went on. It was later revealed by one of the earlier sheriffs who had arrested him that Bracamontes held severe hate for the legal system and police officers. Eventually, Bracamontes admitted to murdering the 2 officers. He told the court that he saw no point in trying to prove whether he did it or not when all the facts pointed to him being the killer. At this point, his attorney gave up defending him and said the same thing to the court. It was no shock that Bracamontes was found guilty.
Mr. Bracamontes is responsible for the deaths of both Deputy Danny Oliver and Detective Mike Davis.
After hearing he was sentenced to death, he cheered audibly when his sentence was announced and smiled before his behavior became more unsettling. He blew kisses, smiled, and clapped towards the victims' families. Finally, as he was being led away, he made a chilling threat for the court to hear. However, it seems like Bracamontes will never get the chance to do as he threatened, because he was moved to death row in Quentin State Prison a few weeks after his sentencing. Luis Bracamontes vowed to kill more, but David Moses brought a whole new meaning to the term no remorse.
A chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
In April 2010, 17-year-old David Moses and two girls entered the home of 81-year-old Dorothy Session in California with the intent of robbing the home. David Moses and the two girls, 17-year-old Angelique Nash and 15-year-old Katila Nash, had planned to rob the house because they thought no one was around. Angelique was left outside to be the stakeout, while David and Katila broke into the house. Upon finding out that someone was in the house, David Moses did the most shocking thing. As Dorothy resisted, Moses beat her mercilessly until she died. Katila also watched as David pummeled Dorothy to death. The police found Dorothy dead and her body was riddled with injuries. She had a broken nose, missing teeth, black eyes, and cuts to her mouth and face. Moses was eventually found and arrested before he was finally convicted of first-degree murder 2 years later when he turned 19. The two sisters were arrested as well, and they were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. It was later revealed that Moses grew up without a father figure, and he was raised by his mother until he was 12 years old. He became a ward of the court and was eventually bounced between group homes due to his erratic and violent behavior toward the other children. While Moses was in the group home, he committed multiple crimes including carjacking and burglary, which led to the murder of Dorothy Session. He was eventually brought to court in 2012. In court, Moses' behavior was shocking to the core. He showed no remorse for his actions and laughed throughout the session. In an attempt to show that he found the procedure boring, Moses yawned and put his head on the table, mimicking falling asleep. At some point, Moses also licked his lips to show that he didn't care and that he didn't believe that anything was wrong. Some online participants assumed that Moses behaved that way because he thought he'd be protected by juvenile court laws, no matter what he did in court.
The chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
David completely fell asleep at some point and didn't care for anything that was going on. The prosecutor said it seemed to him that Moses was enjoying the trial and felt like it was a game. Despite these actions and how he showed no remorse, his attorney asked the judge to consider including the possibility of parole in his sentencing. However, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David showed no reaction and merely licked his lips as he was escorted out. David's case remained closed until 8 years later, when it looked like things were going to change for David. A change in law led Moses to be resentenced. He was tried under juvenile conditions because of how old he was when he murdered Dorothy. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2020 because he showed no form of change since he was sent to prison and still showed no remorse for his actions for the brutal murder of Dorothy Session. During his resentencing, David remained nonchalant, but this time he had no smile on his face and just stood in defiance as he still had no regard for the court. David Moses didn't get a second chance, but Brandon Spencer still has a petition 10 years later to set him free.
Eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022.3D. This is to be concurrent with the...
On October 31st, 2012, 19-year-old Brandon Spencer got involved in a shootout with a rival gang at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus. As a result of the shooting, 4 people were wounded, and the area descended into mayhem. While many students ran away from the shooting, Spencer reportedly ran with the students before he was caught. Brandon was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. It was revealed in court that shots had been fired into the crowd in retaliation at another gang member. In 2014, Brandon went to trial. Despite the fact that all the people called to testify in the case said that Brandon could not have been the shooter because he was never involved in any kind of gang. The court denied him a lawyer and charged him on a witness's testimony and no evidence that linked him to the shooting.
I'm sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but he's life in prison. And
I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
Spencer kept on insisting that he was innocent and kept on pleading for mercy because he admitted to making mistakes. However, the jury refused to take any other thing into account besides the fact that Brandon had shot into an open crowd, even though he didn't murder anyone. In under 3 hours at trial, the jury found Spencer guilty of all charges, and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In response, the 19-year-old broke down as the judge showed no ounce of mercy.
Parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years to life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022, 3D. This is to be concurrent with the
Spencer banged his head on the table twice and cried until he was escorted out. In 2021, however, a podcast was released on the story of Spencer, and his case garnered attention once again. The podcast claimed that Brandon had not shot into the crowd and was only celebrating Halloween with his girlfriend at the University of Southern California. However, the jury portrayed him as a gangbanger, and the testimony of the star witness was all that was used to convict him. The podcast also revealed that Spencer had been shot in the stomach outside a restaurant, and the USC shooting was retaliation, a mistake that Spencer regretted. The star witness recanted their testimony after the investigation revealed that the witness who had been brought in to testify against Spencer was coerced because he had been arrested for an unrelated crime. The prosecution reportedly promised to get the witnesses' charges dropped if they testified that they had seen Spencer shoot into the crowd that night. The witness was charged with stealing $26,000 worth of merchandise from his employer and was not sentenced because he agreed to perjury. The witness said, "I did not see Mr. Spencer leave the party and come back with a gun. I did not see Mr. Spencer shoot a gun into the crowd or at Mr. Hall. I only said that I saw Mr. Spencer come back with the gun because the DA prosecuting the case told me that she needed me to say those things, or else she could not make her case for premeditation. I did what the DA said because I was threatened by the detectives investigating the case, and by the DA prosecuting the case that if I did not say what they needed me to say, the DA would intervene in my own pending criminal case and cause me to be harmed or sentenced more severely." After this was revealed, a Free Brandon Spencer movement began, and 1,800 people signed the petition for Spencer to be released because he was innocent. An Instagram account was created, and the petition to free Brandon Spencer after he spent 10 years in jail is still ongoing. Brandon Spencer's case highlights the devastating impact of gang violence, but the horrors don't stop there. Jay Witt's story takes us down another dark path, a calculated crime driven by chilling motives.
Finding a man wanted for murder. Take a look at him, 47-year-old Jay Witt. He faces a second-degree charge of murder in the death of 48-year-old William Furlong. Police found his body at the Hells Angels headquarters at 27th and J last month.
On the 14th of July, 2013, a high-ranking member and a prospective member of the Hells Angels got into a fight at the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club building in Omaha, Nebraska. Jay Witt and William Furlong, both 48, were having a disagreement when Witt allegedly pulled out a gun and shot Furlong. Unfortunately for Witt, Furlong couldn't survive the inflicted wounds and was eventually found deceased. A warrant was issued for Witt's arrest. Investigators were then able to track Witt through the GPS in a vehicle he had stolen before arresting him around 2 weeks later. Following his arrest, Witt was charged with second-degree murder, as well as charges for the use of a weapon to commit a felony and possession of a weapon by a felon. In response to these charges, during his October 2014 trial, a judge found Mr. Witt guilty of the crimes. However, the second-degree murder charge had been dropped in favor of a manslaughter charge following an earlier guilty plea, which Witt made in exchange for the dropping of his murder charge. While in court, one detective testified that she had found Furlong's body lying face up near the bar area of the clubhouse. Another testified that surveillance footage from outside the clubhouse had shown a man similar to Witt enter into the clubhouse with his girlfriend at around 2:15 a.m., less than 3 hours before Furlong appeared. The video in case showed the man who resembled Witt and his girlfriend leave around 9:30 a.m. with a plastic bag before he's once again spotted, wiping down the door and door handles of a Chevy Cruze with towels before leaving in the vehicle. The woman in the video was identified in court to be Tammy Kozak, and she was charged with tampering of evidence and accessory to murder. And a sergeant in the court testified that she, along with Witt, had stopped at a gas station after they fled the scene before they drove to Harlan, Iowa, probably to get away from the center of the crime. During his court hearing, Witt maintained an ice-cold demeanor, just as you would expect from any Hells Angel. But at the end, the judge sentenced Witt to 30 to 40 years in prison, of which the first 17 and a half must be served before he would be eligible for parole. Witt showed no emotions after listening to his sentence, and even reportedly claimed he did it out of self-defense. Furlong's wife was present in court and came to the defense of her deceased husband, saying he shouldn't be judged by his outward appearance. Witt sadly died in September 2019 at the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, following a long battle with illness. He was 53 years old at the time, and state law required that a grand jury conducted an investigation into the situation.
Yeah, I'll see you all in hell, Louis. Remember that. Every one of you, I'll see you in hell.
Let's head to Hampden County Superior Court, where a dramatic scene unfolds when Caius Veiovis was to be sentenced for 3 counts of murder. Caius Domitius Veiovis, real name Roy Gutfinski, was born in Augusta, Maine, and was a self-proclaimed vampire and Satanist with a bizarrely distinct look. His implanted head bumps would resemble horns, his reshaped earlobes, and his dozens of tattoos, including one on his forehead which reads 666, certainly don't paint the look of an angel. As far back as the year 1995, a 13-year-old Roy Gutfinski Jr., who had already developed a fascination for devil worship, was already getting into serious trouble with law enforcement. When he was 20, a prosecutor recommended that he be kept behind bars for as long as possible following a ritual bloodletting case with his then-girlfriend, which left a 16-year-old girl scarred for life. Gutfinski ended up serving a 7.5-year sentence for this. Gutfinski struggled with substance abuse from a very young age and was in and out of jail a lot between the late 90s and mid-2000s. He constantly referred to himself by the police as a vampire and began to alter his looks, which ultimately culminated in legally changing his name to Caius Veiovis, after a vampire from the TV series Twilight in 2008. In 2011, 3 men, David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell, were found buried outside of Pittsfield, Massachusetts 10 days after they were reported missing. There were 3 suspects: 37-year-old Adam Lee Hall, 47-year-old David Chalou, and Caius Veiovis himself, who was 34 at the time. Prosecutors accused Veiovis of helping the other 2 men kidnap and shoot the victims in order to prevent them from testifying after they witnessed the death of Glasser, who himself was eliminated to prevent him from testifying in a case against Hall, who was a high-ranking member of the Massachusetts chapter of the Hells Angels. Veiovis' trial began nearly 3 years later in September 2014, as he was already pretty notorious at the time, so it was no surprise when a media frenzy erupted around the case due to his involvement in the case. During the trial, both Hall and Chalou were convicted of 3 counts of murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation, and sentenced to life in prison. Veiovis was the last out of the 3 men to face trial, and he pleaded not guilty to all charges against him. Despite the various pieces of evidence which suggested his involvement in the murders, Veiovis' trial was a rather lengthy one and had to be moved 50 miles to Hampden County Superior Court in Springfield to avoid a biased jury. Veiovis tried to maintain his innocence for as long as possible, claiming that he had rejected all the plea deals offered to him from the beginning and that he'd rather do life than accept any of those deals. His court-appointed attorney, James Reardon, also accused the state of lacking concrete evidence against his client. After over 37 hours of deliberation spanning 6 days, the jury found Veiovis guilty of kidnapping, murdering the 3 men, and he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the option of parole.
As to each of the 3 counts of murder, impose a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And Veiovis' reaction to the jury's verdict was something you could have expected. "I'll see you all in hell. Remember that."
Yeah, I'll see you all in hell, Louis. Remember that. Every one of you, I'll see you in hell.
He also revealed that he was going to appeal the verdict to the state Supreme Court. Veiovis, meanwhile, is currently completing his term at Gardner, Massachusetts, North Central Correctional Institution.
Hells Angels just shot at Vagos. There's 2 down.
Let's head to Henderson, Las Vegas, where things escalated into attempted murder on a local highway between 2 rival motorcycle gangs. It was a Memorial Day Sunday morning on the 29th of May, 2022, when members of the Vagos Outlaw motorcycle gang were shot at on a highway while riding back from a Memorial Day event in Boulder City. The perpetrators? Some members of the Hells Angel Motorcycle Club, of course. Police were able to arrest 3 of the suspects, 66-year-old Richard Rizzo DeVries, along with 46-year-old Stephen Allo and 26-year-old Russell Smith. DeVries was eventually identified as the president of the Hells Angels Las Vegas chapter, one of the most powerful chapters of the club, while the other two were said to be Hells Angels prospects. Police reports recounted that while the Vagos members were trying to participate in the prior event, a group of 5 Hells Angels members were seen riding around and followed them till they began to cause problems during the event. They also reportedly left the event about 20 minutes before the Vagos members began riding towards Henderson, where they waited to ambush the Vagos gang. The result was injuries to 6 of the Vagos bikers and a closure of the highway for several hours, as the police conducted an investigation while the injured bikers were transported to a local hospital for treatment. Investigators, in collaboration with the Las Vegas Met Police Department's Criminal Intelligence Unit, were able to identify the 3 suspects using surveillance footage, as well as civilian footage of the shooting. This ultimately led to the June arrest of DeVries and the other 2 men who were booked into the Henderson Detention Center on the charges of 6 counts of attempted murder with a deadly weapon, a single count of conspiracy to commit murder with a deadly weapon, 6 counts of battery with the use of a deadly weapon causing substantial harm, 6 counts of discharging a gun at or into an occupied structure or vehicle, with the latter 2 charges labeled to have occurred with a criminal gang enhancement. 5 additional Hells Angels were also indicted by a second Clark County grand jury in connection with the incident, and additional charges included attempted murder, racketeering, as well as harboring concealed weapons. A Las Vegas former special agent, Aaron Rouse, suggested that the arrests could lead up to a federal prosecution for the Hells Angels on RICO charges based on the group's activities. That kind of thing has the potential to dissolve the Hells Angels Las Vegas chapter. DeVries was able to post bail following his indictment by the Clark County grand jury. His court appearance was set for the 24th of August, 2022, where he appeared with his attorney, Richard Schoenfeld. But on the 3rd of October 2022, he was rearrested and taken back into custody on additional felony charges, which included racketeering. In the court, he showed a cool and calm demeanor, as if to suggest to the court that he had it all under control. This time, 8th District Court Judge Tierra Jones ordered DeVries to be held on a $250,000 bond, which he once again posted. During a separate court hearing set on March 31, 2023, which involved all the other suspects, DeVries' attorney, Richard Schoenfeld, suggested that the evidence used to indict the Hells Angels members was insufficient. He also claimed that Vagos members had concealed weapons during the incident, and that police at the scene had examined some of their handguns only to return them. As a result, the judge instructed prosecutors to revise the indictment. On Monday, May 1, 2023, Clark County District Judge Tierra Jones decided that the 7 alleged Hells Angels members would not be facing racketeering or gang charges for their involvement in the highway shooting, which left a total of 7 people injured. During the hearing, Judge Jones also reduced the number of shooting counts from 25 to 5 in the case against the defendants, including Richard DeVries. DeVries' attorney, Richard Schoenfeld, revealed his pleasure at the judge's ruling, claiming that the initial indictment was too broad and had to be revised. DeVries, along with the other 6 men, which now include Cameron Treach, Aaron Chun, and Ryan Molasco, still face prosecution on charges of attempted murder, battery, and assault with weapons. And even though they've all pleaded not guilty to the charges, they each face up to 40 years in prison if convicted. A trial date has been set for the 28th of May, 2024, a day short of the 2-year anniversary of the incident. For now, the 7 men, including Richard DeVries, are free, but they could be facing the same fate as others on this list by the time you watch this video.
The case has been described as the biggest and most complex gang prosecution in the province. During the trial, 6 state witnesses were murdered.
George Joel Thomas, notorious as the leader of the feared 28s gang in Bishop Lavis, found himself at the center of the country's largest gang trial, accused of orchestrating killings and ordering assassinations while he was locked up in prison. In a trial where only 1 out of 18 accused was acquitted of all charges, all testimonies pointed at Thomas's involvement. One witness recounted the gang's attempt to assassinate Curtis Esterhuizen, a member of the rival Clever Kids gang who survived a shootout on April 14, 2008. The very next day, police caught 3 individuals, including George Thomas, after a shooting incident in Bishop Lavis. Thomas was allegedly found in the back of a bakkie, armed with a rifle equipped with a telescopic sight and silencer, while others carried a box of ammunition in the front. But the terror surrounding Esterhuizen's life didn't end there. On September 8, 2008, a third incident occurred where shots were fired on the street where Esterhuizen resided, paralyzing 1 person. Tragically, during a fourth attempt on November 23, 2008, Marvin Esterhuizen lost his life simply because he was mistaken for his brother Curtis by attackers. Despite surviving a point-blank shot to the head on November 2, 2009, Curtis Esterhuizen declined the offer of witness protection, only to meet his demise 5 months later while riding his bicycle in Bishop Lavas. The 28s gang was regarded as a criminal enterprise operating under the leadership of George Jewel Thomas of the Cape Flats. Seated beside him in the dock was Ashraf Arab Rycliffe, a leader of the 26s gang known for their bloody turf wars with the 28s. Despite the rivalry, it was alleged that the two gangs conspired to eliminate the father of a key witness in the trial, Cecil Barnes. Tragically, Barnes was fatally shot in his kitchen in Bishop Lavas on October 16, 2010. Despite the dangers posed by his involvement in the trial, Cecil Barnes chose not to accept the state's offer of witness protection, standing firm alongside his son, Regan Barnes, in their pursuit of justice. The indictment against Jewel Thomas listed a staggering array of charges, including 19 counts of murder, 29 attempted murders, extortion, racketeering, incitement, conspiracy, theft, robbery, and possession of firearms and ammunition. The state planned to summon 370 witnesses, with several of them placed under witness protection for their safety. But several state witnesses met untimely deaths, allegedly on orders from Thomas while he was still in prison since his 2008 arrest.
During the trial, 6 state witnesses were murdered, allegedly on Thomas's instructions while he was incarcerated.
According to many, Thomas was responsible, all while being locked up in his prison cell. One chilling instance of allegation is that Thomas ordered the assassination of Andrew Williams over a phone call from inside a cell at the Delft police station on May 5, 2008. And in May 2015, George Jewel Thomas received life sentences for each of the 7 murders for which he was convicted. Despite all the lives he took and the families he destroyed, Thomas maintained a smug demeanor, his arrogance palpable even as the weight of justice bore down upon him. He was found guilty on a staggering 53 charges, including 7 counts of murder, 2 of racketeering, and multiple other serious offenses. The convictions spanned a series of gruesome crimes, with Thomas held accountable for the deaths of individuals such as Angelo Klassen, Glenston Martin, Uzrea Abrahams, Haywin Stridham, Cecil Barnes, Gresham Boyson, and Nadine Davids, each tragedy leaving a deep scar on the communities affected. Accompanying Thomas were 16 co-accused, all facing a multitude of charges amounting to 166 in total, encompassing murder, attempted murder, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit crimes. His co-defendants, sharing the dock with him, also remained stoic in the face of their convictions. Our next case of the Carpio brothers is almost like it's out of a blockbuster gang movie.
2 gang members were sentenced today for killing a teenager on a high school campus in the Valley.
In the late afternoon of April 24, 2013, Antonio and Michael Stephen Carpio, known as the Rockwoods, due to their affiliation with the Rampart area street gang with the same name, arrived at Cleveland High School to pick up their 15-year-old brother, George, who was a student. Raised in Los Angeles, the Carpio brothers had been initiated into one of the notorious Rockwood street gangs in the Westlake area, which led their family to move to Panorama City in hopes of distancing themselves from the grip of gang life. It's speculated that one or both of the assailants may have also attended Cleveland High at some point, according to accounts from students. It was during this visit to the school that they encountered Kevin Orellana, a former student who still visited the campus to play handball with his friends. Orellana, an 18-year-old known for his athleticism and agility, was also called La Pulga, in English, the Flea, for his small stature and lightning-fast reflexes as a soccer goalie. Despite having graduated from Reseda High School a year prior, Orellana continued to spend time at Cleveland High while attending the West Valley Occupational Center in Woodland Hills to complete his high school education.
As a parent, we plan to dance at their wedding, celebrate a promotion, look forward to possible grandchildren. The last thought we would ever have is that we will have to plan their funeral.
Kevin Orellana of North Hollywood aspired to be a rapper, with plans to pursue enrollment in Cal State Northridge's esteemed kinesiology program as a backup. Despite his shaved head and numerous tattoos, Orellana staunchly distanced himself from gang affiliations, a fact reiterated by both Doerbecker and his family members. But his encounter with the Carpio brothers made everything crash. as the elder Carpio asked Orellana where he was from, insinuating gang ties. Orellana firmly denied any such association, saying that he belonged to no gang. The altercation escalated swiftly, with the taller Carpio initiating physical violence. Yet Orellana, despite his smaller stature, quickly gained the upper hand. But the confrontation took a tragic turn when the younger Carpio brother brandished a knife from his pocket and delivered 2 fatal stab wounds to Orellana's chest. Afterward, the Carpio brothers quickly fled the scene, with members of the Cleveland football team in pursuit. Despite efforts to catch them, the brothers managed to escape to a maroon minivan. Orellana was quickly transported to Northridge Hospital Medical Center, but it was too late to save him. Medical examination revealed a fatal stab wound piercing his heart, sealing his untimely demise and leaving a community reeling in shock and grief. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the police documented every detail. Among the array of evidence, they noted the remnants of the victim's clothing and traced a trail of blood and red stains on the asphalt, which suggested a frantic escape. One notable detail that caught the police's attention was a water bottle belonging to a teacher who tried to help the victim. But it was the unwavering courage of the student witnesses that left a lasting impression. Despite the looming threat of retaliation in a gang-affiliated case, these young individuals stood firm, eager to provide invaluable testimony. One particular student provided key details, linking one of the suspects to a distinctive tattoo often seen on campus, ultimately leading to the identification of Michael Carpio. Following their apprehension at their residence in Panorama City, the Carpio brothers offered varying accounts on the events leading up to the fatal stabbing. Michael Carpio claimed that Orellana had provoked him with a threatening glare, while Anthony initially denied involvement before eventually conceding to being present on the campus. But when pressed for a motive behind the stabbing, Anthony's response remained cryptic. In the end, Anthony Carpio of Panorama City and his brother, Michael Steve Carpio, from Pacoima, were found guilty on October 31, 2015, of second-degree murder in connection with the tragic death of Kevin Orellana. Anthony, who was 16 years old at the time of the fatal incident when he wielded a knife and inflicted multiple stab wounds upon Orellana, received a sentence of 16 years to life in prison. Meanwhile, his older brother Michael, who was an adult at the time of the April 24, 2013 killing and was reportedly unarmed during the attack, was sentenced to 15 years to life behind bars. This case serves as a tragic reminder that the mentality of gang members can have a devastating impact on the innocent. If the Carpio brothers hadn't gotten involved with their gang at such young ages, Kevin Orellana would be alive today. Now, we're going all the way to Springfield, where a Latin King member is facing first-degree murder charges.
Charged with robbery, drug crimes, and other offenses. A spokesperson for the district attorney's office, Jim Lagden, told 22 News another defendant, Jonathan Guevara, was also charged with the murder of 18-year-old Lopez.
The discovery of 18-year-old Latin King member Kenneth Lopez's body on March 25, 2015, sent shockwaves through the city's north end. Found in the yard of a house at Dwight and Calhoun Streets, Lopez had succumbed to fatal gunshot wounds sustained overnight. The perpetrator behind this was revealed to be a 25-year-old Latin King member, Lee Rios. Following the murder, Rios stockpiled ammunition and firearms as he believed that the gang would seek retribution for his actions. The murder of Kenneth Lopez was not a spur-of-the-moment act, but rather a meticulously planned and aggressively pursued crime. Rios himself orchestrated the murder with calculated precision with the help of fellow Latin Kings members. Despite both Lopez and Rios being affiliated with the Latin Kings, their relationship had soured, leading to a falling out between them. In an attempt to reconcile their differences, Rios devised a plan to lure Lopez from his residence under the guise of resolving a personal conflict. But his intentions proved futile, and it culminated in a tragic and fatal outcome. On February 7, 2017, Lee Rios faced the consequences of his actions as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he listened to the judge reading the verdict, Rios' demeanor was quite calm for someone who just found out that they will be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. The next case shows how power and poor judgment can collide. Robert Olson was supposed to protect his community. Instead, he left a man dead and a city divided.
I was waiting for him to say something else, such as there was a stick or some type of weapon that he was coming toward Robert Olson.
A veteran who served his country, a police officer sworn to protect. One tragic encounter changed everything. This is the story of Anthony Hill, unarmed, unclothed, and killed. And after years of trials and appeals, the final verdict left the nation asking, was justice truly served? In March 2015, police in DeKalb County, Georgia received a call. A naked man was acting erratically outside an apartment complex. The man was 26-year-old Anthony Hill, a U.S. Air Force veteran who had served his country but was struggling with bipolar disorder and PTSD. When former officer Robert Chip Olson arrived at the scene, he claimed he felt threatened. Instead of de-escalating the situation, Olson pulled out his gun. He shot Anthony Hill, unarmed and unclothed, ending his life instantly. After the call about a naked, erratically behaving man, police rushed to the Atlanta area apartment complex. Robert Olson, a DeKalb County officer at the time, confronted 26-year-old Anthony Hill. Within moments, Olson fired, fatally wounding Hill. The incident immediately sparked outrage. The shooting quickly raised questions. Why did a trained officer use deadly force against a man who had no weapon? Authorities launched a full investigation into Olson's actions. When the trial began, Robert Olson had support from friends, former colleagues, and some community members. They described him as a dedicated officer and claimed he acted in self-defense. His lawyers used these testimonials to portray him as a man caught in a tragic situation. The jury was not swayed by his supporters. In 2019, they found Olson guilty on all 3 charges and sentenced him to 12 years in prison with 8 years on probation. However, the case was far from over.
No, I didn't get what I wanted the maximum. Some time is better than no time.
Olson appealed, and in 2022, the Georgia Court of Appeals overturned part of his conviction. The judges ruled that evidence about the police department's use of force policy had been improperly admitted, giving prosecutors the option to retry him for aggravated assault. Olson maintained that he fired in self-defense, but prosecutors painted a different picture, a case of excessive force. Anthony Hill had needed help. Instead, he was met with deadly gunfire. In August 2023, Olson entered a guilty plea to aggravated assault. His new sentence was 15 years, with 12 years already served. The rest will be probation. He will not return to prison. He must also complete 100 hours of community service. However, he remained emotionless, as he had no regret for what he had done. For Anthony Hill's family, the pain never goes away. His father said,
"Just make eye contact with me. Just, you don't have to say anything, but just your eyes can tell whether or not."
District Attorney Sherry Boston said she hoped this guilty plea would finally bring some peace. Yet many believe justice was only partial. A man lost his life to the very system meant to protect him. But our next case takes fear to the next level, where an officer didn't just misuse his authority, he weaponized it.
I found solace in Mr. Nash helping me in such a dire time of need when I felt like I had no one. And now to say that or even think that's how I felt towards you is absolute poison in my mouth.
He wore a badge, but behind the uniform, Nathan Nash had a dark secret. 2 women accused him of the unthinkable, and the courtroom would expose everything. In 2019, 25-year-old TP stepped forward with a shocking claim against Officer Nathan Nash. She had called the police for help, reporting an assault by her boyfriend, but the officer who was meant to protect her shattered that trust, prosecutors say. Nash returned to her home and turned her plea for safety into a nightmare of betrayal. Months later, another woman came forward with a similar story. The department acted and fired Nash, but the damage had already been done. Authorities launched a full investigation into Nash's actions. They gathered testimonies, evidence, and connected the 2 cases. It became clear that he had misused his position to prey on women. One woman stated in the court,
I was terrified. I was just stoned. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think.
In August, a jury found Nathan Nash guilty of serious misconduct charges. The courtroom was tense. Nash denied the charges and maintained his innocence. There was no simple explanation. Experts say he used his authority as a police officer to gain control over victims. His badge became a tool for exploitation instead of protection. Nash was sentenced to 14 years to life in prison, yet the courtroom remained tense as he faced no visible reaction. He also awaits a hearing in December for an official misconduct charge. Meanwhile, one of his victims has filed a $1 million claim against the city, accusing the police department of turning a blind eye to warning signs that might have stopped his crimes. despite the gravity of the accusations. Nash sat unflinching, showing no remorse for what he did. The case shocked the community. People trusted him to protect them, yet he betrayed that trust most horrifically. Justice has been served, but the pain left behind is lasting. One cop preyed on women who called for help. The next case explores how an officer targeted a woman too vulnerable to fight back, turning a traffic stop into something unthinkable.
My life has been forever changed. Every aspect of my life has been affected. My children have struggled.
A police officer crossed the line. One woman's trust was shattered in an instant. In court, the truth would expose a shocking betrayal that shook the entire town. On July 9th, 2016, Eric Fritz, a covert police officer, pulled over a man for drunk driving. The man went to jail, but Fritz's attention turned to the woman in the passenger seat. She was highly intoxicated, completely vulnerable, and he took advantage. According to the investigators, Fritz checked the woman into a hotel after his shift. She had passed out when he returned. Later, she said she woke up to him being intimate with her. He claimed it was consensual. She told a different story.
I can't see a police vehicle without feeling fear or be reminded of what happened.
Body cam footage showed him leading her along with him. The recordings proved he mistreated his authority and took advantage of someone vulnerable. The case went to court. Fritz faced charges of kidnapping and assault. But in a plea deal, those were dropped, leaving him to plead guilty to unlawful imprisonment. Fritz used his position as a police officer to exploit someone defenseless, a gross mistreatment of power that stunned the community. Judge Kathleen Brickley did not mince words, calling it one of the most despicable cases the court had ever seen. She sentenced Fritz to 1 year in jail, followed by 5 years of probation. However, he had no guilt for his actions. The victim told the court it wasn't enough, but she found some relief knowing Fritz would never wear a badge again.
What you did to me was wrong. You raped me. You knew I was highly intoxicated, yet you used that as a selfish opportunity.
A woman's trust was shattered in a single night. But the next case shows what happens when an officer's split-second decision takes a man's life in front of an entire neighborhood.
My son was murdered, and the man that murdered my son gets to go home to his sons.
The courtroom was packed. Family, friends, supporters, and all eyes were on Zachariah Presley, a former police officer. He was about to hear his fate for killing an unarmed man. On June 20th, 2018, 33-year-old Tony Green was involved in a routine traffic stop in Kingsland, Georgia. Video from Presley's body camera and patrol car dash cam captured the chase. Presley followed Tony onto a dark street at night. What should have ended as a simple encounter turned into a deadly chase. Tony got out of his car and ran, and that's when everything spiraled out of control. Tony returned to his car briefly, seemingly reaching for an object when Presley gave chase. The night was chaotic. Visibility was low, and tensions ran high. Then came the crackle of a stun gun, followed by gunshots. Presley can be heard telling Tony to stay still and assuring him that help was on the way. When another officer arrived, Presley was lying on the ground, saying his head hurt from a struggle with Tony. The investigation revealed the deadly outcome. Tony Green was fatally shot while running away. Presley's actions were scrutinized by the Camden County jury, and despite acquittals on 2 manslaughter charges, he was convicted of mistreating his oath of office. Why did it happen? The evidence suggests it wasn't self-defense.
The attacked me, been on top of me, and I was tased, and he was going for my duty belt.
Presley's misuse of his authority turned a traffic stop into a tragedy. Circuit Judge Stephen Scarlett sentenced Presley to 1 year in prison, followed by 4 years of probation. However, he remained silent. Presley was fired from the Kingsland Police Department, and his attorneys have since appealed the conviction. Family, friends, and the entire community rallied together for Tony, grieving a life taken too soon and raising their voices in a powerful call for justice. A traffic stop that ended in death left a family in pieces. But in our next case, another so-called routine stop would spark years of outrage, courtroom battles, and a verdict that divided a city.
During a violent traffic stop when Amiot pulled over then 25-year-old Richard Huber and accused him of resisting arrest.
What began as a routine traffic stop quickly spiraled into chaos, igniting years of courtroom battles, public fury, and fierce debates over justice. At the center of it all stood Officer Michael Amiot and Richard Hubbard. It all started in August 2017. Euclid Police Officer Michael Amiot pulled over Richard Hubbard because the license plate on his car was linked to a driver with a suspended license. What should have been a standard stop quickly escalated. Witnesses said Amiot used excessive force, and video later confirmed the furious encounter. The incident sparked immediate backlash. The Euclid Police Department launched an internal review, and Amiot was placed on non-enforcement duties. His employment was eventually terminated that same year, but the case didn't end there. In October 2018, an arbitrator reinstated him to the department. In court, Michael testified on his own behalf.
When I asked him to get out of the car, he started stepping out of the car.
By August 2019, criminal charges were filed. The long wait for justice continued until July 2022, when a jury found Amiot guilty of 2 misdemeanor charges: assault and interfering with basic rights. The ruling confirmed what many had suspected. The stop was more than just bad policing. It was a violation of basic rights. Unlike many crimes with clear motives, this case was different. At its core, the problem was the mistreatment of authority. A moment of power turned into conflict, and a citizen's rights were ignored. Finally, in 2022, Amiot was sentenced in Euclid Municipal Court. The judge gave him a 90-day suspended sentence, 1 year of probation, and fines. However, he showed no remorse for his actions. His future in the police department remained uncertain, though at the time, he was working in the warrant unit. For Richard Hubbard and the community, the damage had already been done. Richard said,
I'm still going through like the suffering with the anxiety. It just brings up everything, like we live in the moment. So, I hope he gets the maximum sentences today,
Even the Fraternal Order of Police stood behind Amiot, promising to support him despite the verdict. Our next case follows a former police officer turned Playboy model. Lori Bembenek went from upholding the law to standing trial for murder.
She stands convicted again of killing a young woman while her small children slept in nearby beds.
On May 28, 1981, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a quiet neighborhood was shaken by the killing of a young mother. Christine Schultz, a nurse and mother of 2, was found bound, gagged, and shot inside her own home. Her sons were asleep in the next room. The community was shocked, but what came as an even greater surprise was the identity of the main suspect, 22-year-old Lori Bembenek, a former police officer and the new wife of Christine's ex-husband. Lori's story captured national attention, led to public debates, inspired books and movies, and eventually earned her the nickname Bambi. Lori had trained at the Milwaukee Police Academy and briefly served as a patrol officer. However, her career was cut short after a scandal involving another officer, and she was fired. Later, she married Fred Schultz, a veteran officer who had 2 sons from his previous marriage to Christine Schultz. Lori quickly stepped into the role of stepmother. Just months into her marriage, tragedy struck. Christine was killed in her home in a horrifying attack. She had been tied up and shot through the heart. One of her sons described seeing a masked figure with a reddish ponytail leaving the house. While the witness believed the intruder was a man, the investigation soon focused on Lori instead. Detectives discovered that the killing weapon was Fred Schultz's off-duty revolver, which had been kept in the apartment he shared with Lori. Lori also had access to a copy of the key to Christine's house. There was no sign of forced entry. Witnesses said Lori had previously made comments suggesting she wanted Christine gone. Police found a wig in the plumbing system of her apartment that matched fibers discovered at the crime scene. A green jogging suit, a clothesline, and a blue bandana, all similar to the items used during the killing, were also linked to her. Even though Christine's son had described the killer as a man, Lori was arrested. The trial quickly became a media sensation. Prosecutors painted Lori as a jealous woman who wanted her husband's ex-wife out of their lives forever. On March 9, 1982, Lori Bembenek was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, but the case did not end there. It took an unexpected twist years later. In 1990, Lori escaped from Tachita Correctional Institution with help from her new fiancé. The two fled across the border and were eventually found in Canada after more than 3 months on the run. The press had a field day. Headlines around the country read, "Run, Bambi, run," and the case gained even more fame. Prosecutors argued that Lori's motive was simple. They claimed she wanted financial freedom. With Christine gone, Lori and Fred would no longer need to deal with child support or alimony. They said she wanted to take Christine's place completely. but Lori continued to maintain her innocence. Over time, new evidence raised questions about the original investigation. Male DNA was discovered at the scene. Ballistics tests did not match Fred's gun, and even the hair samples presented during the trial were later disputed.
Lori Bembenek has not slowed down the controversy over whether she was guilty or innocent of murdering her husband's ex-wife.
Some believed Lori had been framed. Others suspected that someone else had been involved, even someone hired to commit the killing. Doubts began to grow about whether justice had truly been served. In 1992, after spending nearly 11 years behind bars, Lori accepted a plea deal. However, she showed no emotion during her sentencing. She entered a no-contest plea to second-degree murder in exchange for time already served and was placed on probation for 10 years. She walked free, but never stopped trying to clear her name. Her attempts to appeal were consistently denied, mostly because of that no-contest plea. Still, Lori pushed forward, pointing to inconsistencies in the evidence and testimonies that changed over time. She eventually moved to Washington, married again, and tried to live a normal life. But her health continued to decline. She suffered from post-traumatic stress, battled alcoholism, and later lost part of her leg after a serious fall. On November 20th, 2010, Lori Bembenek passed away at the age of 52. Lori Bembenek's story continues to haunt and divide. Some believe she was a cold-blooded killer, while others see her as a woman wrongly convicted by a flawed system. Many wonder if she took the fall for someone else's crime. The full truth may never be known, but one thing is certain. Her case permanently changed public perception of justice and the media. Our next case reveals how a single shot shattered a promising future.
Delta 310, reminder they're armed. Good public felony.
In 2013, in Dallas, Texas, a former police officer made a tragic mistake that changed a young man's life forever. Amy Wilburn, once a Dallas police officer, shot an innocent man who had his hands raised. In 2013, Kelvin Walker was sitting in the front seat of a stolen car. He didn't know the car was stolen and was not involved in any crime. When police arrived, Kelvin raised his hands to show he was not a threat. Despite this, Amy Wilburn fired her gun and shot him. After the shooting, the Dallas Police Department investigated the incident. Wilburn said she could not see Kelvin's right hand and thought she was in danger. But an independent witness confirmed Kelvin had his hands up. Because of her actions, Amy Wilburn was fired from the police force. Amy Wilburn pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of discharging a firearm within a city. She gave up her peace officer's license and was sentenced to 18 months of deferred adjudication, which means she avoided jail time, but had to follow court orders.
Turned me up on the inside. Every day I look at my scars. Every day I wake up to a bullet that's still in me.
The shooting wasn't driven by anger, but stemmed from fear and poor judgment in a high-pressure moment. Still, the harm done to Kelvin was very real and life-altering. Despite this, Wilburn showed no remorse and maintained a cold demeanor during sentencing. Kelvin Walker spoke in court about how the shooting changed his life. Once a star athlete and starting quarterback, he said, "Now I can't run. I can't jump. I can't do anything." He has also filed a civil rights lawsuit against Amy Wilburn and the city of Dallas, with a trial planned soon. For almost 5 years, Kelvin lived with the pain and struggled from that day. In court, he said, "It's been hurting me and killing me." When he saw Amy Wilburn again in court, she said nothing as she left. Our next case is full of jealousy and deception, where a police officer crossed the line with a deadly plan.
Who, according to the FBI, went out and tried to hire a hitman in order to kill her estranged husband and the daughter.
On a quiet morning in May 2019, officers arrived at the Suffolk County home of Valerie Cincinnelli, a New York police officer with 5 years of service. They had devastating news to deliver. Her estranged husband, Isaiah Carvalho, had just been found dead. Valerie broke down on the spot, appearing shocked and overwhelmed. Based on the information the press could get their hands on, the scene looked like a tragic end to a rocky marriage. But behind that grief was a far darker truth. Just days earlier, federal agents were tipped off about a disturbing murder-for-hire plot allegedly orchestrated by Valerie herself. While still serving as an NYPD officer, she had reached out to her boyfriend, John DeRuba, and asked him to find a hitman. The target was her husband Isaiah. But what truly shocked investigators was that Valerie also allegedly wanted another person dead, DeRuba's 13-year-old daughter. She reportedly hated the teen and was jealous of the expensive gifts John was buying her. Instead of going along with the plan, John went straight to the FBI. The FBI acted fast. They launched a sting operation to catch Valerie in the act. First, they convinced Isaiah to play dead. He recalled how agents placed shattered glass around the passenger seat and told him to slump over, as if he had been shot. Then they took a fake crime scene photo and used it to trick Valerie into believing her plan had succeeded. Agents showed up at her door with grim expressions and broke the news. Her reaction was caught on video. She seemed shocked, even heartbroken, but prosecutors said it was all a fake. They had wiretaps, text messages, and secret recordings proving Valerie had planned the whole thing. The moment everything unraveled came when Valerie, thinking she was in the clear, told John to erase any evidence. "Delete my effing texts. You're not keeping anything on this effing phone."
Delete my text. You're not keeping anything on this phone.
That was when the FBI moved in and made the arrest. Investigators believed Valerie was driven by jealousy and control. Her marriage was crumbling, and her relationship with John was full of tension. She allegedly couldn't stand the attention and money John gave to his daughter. Prosecutors said she was willing to kill both her husband and a teenage girl just to get her way. Valerie was arrested and charged in federal court, while the murder-for-hire charges were dropped as a part of a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. In 2021, she was sentenced to 48 months in prison. She was suspended from the NYPD without pay and later resigned from the force. Deruba was not charged. For Isaiah Carvalho, the entire ordeal left deep scars. He now lives with constant fear, always looking over his shoulder. "I thought I married someone who swore to protect and serve," he said in an interview. "Instead, I got someone who tried to have me killed." Even today, the memory of pretending to be dead in the car, surrounded by broken glass, still haunts him. Our next case is a devastating nightmare. A split-second mistake that cost a young life forever.
I grabbed the wrong gun! I shot him! Oh my God! Oh my God!
On a Sunday afternoon, April 11th, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, 20-year-old Dante Wright was driving with his girlfriend when his car was pulled over by the police. What began as a routine traffic stop ended in tragedy and sent shockwaves across the country. Dante Wright, a young black father, was stopped for minor traffic violations. As officers checked his ID, they discovered he had an outstanding warrant. When they attempted to arrest him, the situation quickly escalated. In the middle of the struggle, Officer Kimberly Potter pulled out her gun, mistaking it for her taser, and fired one shot. Dante was struck in the chest. He drove a short distance before crashing. Paramedics tried to save him, but it was too late. Dante Wright died at the scene. The next day, body cam footage was released. It showed Potter shouting, "Taser, taser, taser," just before pulling the trigger. Her reaction was immediate. She realized she had fired her handgun instead. The video confirmed the tragic mistake.
Tase him! Taser, taser, taser! Ah, he shot me. Oh, my shit!
In the following days, both Kimberly Potter and the police chief resigned from their positions. Protests erupted across Minnesota and the country. Dante's death reopened painful wounds, especially with the George Floyd trial happening just miles away. As public pressure mounted, Potter was arrested and charged with manslaughter. Prosecutors argued that she had years of training and should have known the difference between a bright yellow taser and a black handgun. The case went to trial, and the courtroom was heavy with emotion. Potter took the stand and tearfully admitted her mistake, but Dante's family, especially his mother, found no comfort in her words. This was not a premeditated act, it was a deadly error. Potter said she was under stress and confused at the moment, but her mistake ended her life. Dante Wright would never return home to his family or raise his young son. On December 23, 2021, Kimberly Potter was found guilty of both first and second-degree manslaughter. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and served just 16 months. When the verdict was read, she tearfully apologized for her actions. Many felt the punishment did not reflect the gravity of the loss. Dante's family reached a $3.25 million settlement with the city. His name became another symbol in a national conversation about police use of force and injustice. Dante's mother said she could never forgive Potter for what had been taken from them. Our next case reveals a robbery carried out by a former officer that left an entire neighborhood stunned.
Former New Orleans police officer who killed 3 people back in the 90s during a shocking crime.
In 1995, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Antoinette Frank, a former New Orleans police officer, was involved in a deadly robbery at a local restaurant. 3 people were killed, including a fellow officer. The case shocked the community and led to a long investigation. The tragedy happened at the Kim On restaurant, where both Antoinette Frank and Officer Ronald Williams II worked extra shifts as security guards. That night, the robbery turned deadly. Frank and an accomplice opened fire, killing Officer Williams along with Ha Vu and Quang Vu. After the shooting, Frank left the restaurant but returned later pretending to bring help. However, members of the Vu family who had hidden inside a large cooler recognized her when she came back. Their eyewitness accounts helped investigators connect her to the crime. Frank's accomplice was also arrested and is now serving a life sentence. Antoinette Frank was eventually sentenced to death for killing. However, when the verdict was announced, she walked out of the courtroom with a blank, expressionless face. But in 2025, she requested clemency from the Louisiana Pardon Board, asking to have her sentence reduced. After emotional testimony from both supporters and victims' families, the board's vote ended in a tie. With a 2-2 vote, her request was officially denied. While the motive behind the crime was believed to be robbery,
Frank is trying to avoid the death sentence handed down after her conviction in a 1995 triple murder.
Frank's supporters pointed to her deeply painful past. She had suffered years of mistreatment as a child, including repeated assault by her father and being forced into a termination of pregnancy. Despite this, the board focused on her conduct in prison and concerns about public safety if her sentence was changed. Governor John Bell Edwards had voiced strong opposition to the death penalty and supported clemency hearings for many death row inmates, including Frank. But due to political blocks and the board's split decision, her sentence remains unchanged. Antoinette Frank is still on death row with no chance of parole. The families of the victims, especially Officer Williams' son, strongly opposed any eligibility for leniency. This case continues to raise difficult questions about justice, accountability, and forgiveness. While Frank's past is tragic, the suffering she caused can never be erased. It is a painful reminder that one decision, one act of conflict, can destroy multiple lives and leave lasting scars on everyone involved. Our next case begins with a night of drinking and ranting online and ends with Jessica Beauvais killing an NYPD officer in a drunk driving crash.
Begged and pleaded with God to stop the nightmare, to stop time. In that moment, I wish I never existed at all and to hurt my children.
He was a husband, a father, a hero on duty, a decorated NYPD detective. She was drunk behind the wheel. Their worlds collided on the Long Island Expressway. Now, the courtroom has the final word. On April 27, 2021, Detective Anastasios Sakos was working the night shift with the NYPD's Highway Patrol Unit. He was diverting traffic on the Long Island Expressway after an earlier accident. At home, he had a wife and 2 young children waiting for him, but he would never return. That same night, 32-year-old Jessica Beauvais got behind the wheel after drinking. Driving at high speed, she struck Detective Sakos and left the scene. The crash was so violent that it stunned the city. A respected officer, a father, and a friend were gone in an instant. Police quickly tracked Beauvais down. Evidence confirmed she had been drinking before the crash. A video from her podcast showed her sipping drinks while recording at the studio. When reporters asked where she was coming from, she replied, What made it worse, she had not stopped. She had tried to run. Prosecutors built their case around her reckless choices, while her defense argued she had been working in healthcare during the pandemic and was overwhelmed. But excuses could not erase the fact that an innocent man was dead. The trial ended with the weight of justice. Beauvais was convicted of aggravated manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident. The courtroom was filled with uniformed officers, all standing for their fallen brother. There was no personal motive, only negligence. One decision to drink and drive led to an irreversible loss. The judge sentenced Beauvais to 20 years for aggravated manslaughter, plus 7 years to run concurrently. However, at the time of sentencing, she remained emotionless.
Is that he be incarcerated for a determined period of 20 years, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. Is that he be incarcerated for a minimum of 23rd to a maximum of 7 years to run concurrent with the first count.
Justice was handed down, but it brought no celebration. The judge said,
Tell yahoos in our society to spend their time protesting the police or pointing to fund the police. They should have a glimpse of what transpired in this case.
The most heartbreaking moment came from Detective Sakos' widow, Irene. Fighting tears, she told the court about the night officers knocked on her door. She described the pain of telling her children. She said,
Their favorite person was gone. That broke me.
one life taken in a reckless moment and no remorse in sight. But decades of silence can't hide the next woman's jealousy, a crime frozen in time, finally catching up to her.
Those two things snatched away from her by Yvonne was too much to bear. So, waited outside her apartment on a dark December morning and shot her to death.
She waited nearly 40 years before justice caught up. An 81-year-old woman was finally sentenced to life in prison for gunning down her romantic rival back in 1985. And by the time she's even eligible for parole, she'll be more than 100 years old. December 1985, St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin. 45-year-old Yvonne Menke stepped outside her apartment early in the morning to warm up her car before work. Minutes later, her daughter heard a sharp cracking sound, like a whip. She looked out the window and saw someone in a gray coat and scarf running from the scene. On the steps outside their home, Yvonne lay bleeding from gunshot wounds. She would not survive. Detectives quickly realized this was no random attack. Yvonne had been shot 3 times. Investigators found snowy boot prints near the crime scene, and inside her purse was a note listing details about a truck belonging to 42-year-old Mary Jo Bailey. They also said,
The patrolman arrived. He, along with the victim's daughter, went down to the sidewalk area, covered staircase, and found the 40-year-old mother laying face down in cool blood.
Both women had been romantically involved with the same man, Jack Owen. But Owen told police his relationship with Bailey had already ended. Suspicion still fell on her, especially after Yvonne's family reported strange phone calls around that time. Calls asking when Yvonne left for work. Despite the suspicions, the case went cold for decades. Bailey insisted she had nothing to do with the murder. She admitted she once owned a .22 caliber pistol, but claimed it was gone. Investigators lacked the evidence to tie her directly to the crime. For nearly 40 years, Yvonne's family lived without answers. Then, in 2023, authorities reopened the case. This time, they built a stronger case using old interviews, the motive, and the boot print evidence. Bailey was arrested at her home in Arizona and brought back to Wisconsin to face trial. Prosecutors laid out a clear motive: jealousy. Bailey could not accept that her ex was with Yvonne. The love triangle fueled resentment, and on that cold December morning, prosecutors said Bailey ambushed Yvonne outside her home, shooting her in the head after she had already fallen to the ground. In May 2024, a jury found Bailey guilty of first-degree murder. The now wheelchair-bound 81-year-old was sentenced to life in prison. Bailey, who still maintains her innocence, chose not to speak in court, as she has no guilt for her actions. State law requires Bailey to serve at least 20 years before parole eligibility. By then, she will be 101 years old. During sentencing, Yvonne's children spoke about their lifelong pain. Her daughter, Julie, said,
I pray Mom can now rest in peace knowing today is the day of your sentencing.
Justice waited nearly 40 years, but when it arrived, the guilt remained cold. Next, a single reckless choice on the road would shatter another family's world.
And that's when Lieutenant Holloway had said, Barry Nicholas is gone.
A Chattanooga officer lies dead. The accused driver is in the hot seat. But the shocking twists in this case could leave the courtroom stunned. Janet Hines stands accused of hitting and killing Officer Nicholas Gallinger in a hit-and-run back in February 2019. The crash happened while Gallinger was inspecting a flooded manhole on Hamel Road. Since then, the case has been tangled in delays, court battles, and arguments over evidence. Officers investigated the scene carefully. They examined Hines' white Honda CR-V with a smashed windshield. They collected evidence from her home and her car, but the defense argues the search was flawed. Her attorney, Ben McGowan, claimed the blood test was done too late, 36 hours after the crash, and evidence from the car and home should be thrown out. Inside the courtroom, tensions flared. McGowan accused the police and district attorney of withholding evidence, pointing to body camera footage suggesting a second car may have hit Officer Gallinger. But testimony showed otherwise. Chief David Roddy confirmed the department's investigation was thorough and the judge ruled that non-existent evidence cannot be demanded. Unlike other cases where anger, revenge, or personal issues drive a crime, this was a tragic case of alleged DUI and recklessness. Hines' trial will determine if she acted under the influence and failed to render aid. Jury selection is set for September 16, 2020, with the trial beginning September 20th. Attorneys are preparing for a battle over what evidence the jury will see. Blood test results, home searches, and car evidence could all play a critical role. During the trial, prosecutors painted a damning picture. They said Janet Hines had been drinking heavily that night and still chose to get behind the wheel. A single reckless decision that cost a life and left an entire community reeling. The prosecutor drove the point home with a chilling line.
Herself, I've had a little too much to drink, and I shouldn't be driving. She would have made a good decision that evening, then we wouldn't be here.
The defense tried to cast doubt on whether her level of intoxication could be reliably proven hours later, but the jury was unconvinced. After deliberations, the jury returned a guilty verdict.
Of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in injury or death. In regard to count 4, it is the verdict of the jury that you are guilty of failing to report an accident.
When sentencing came, the courtroom fell silent as the judge delivered the punishment. Janet Hines was sentenced to 11 years in prison. She chose silence. No apology, no final words, just a chilling quiet that echoed through the courtroom. The community remembers Officer Gallinger as a dedicated officer. The court proceedings have been tense and heated, but every step brings the case closer to justice. One more life lost to a driver's recklessness, silence echoing in the courtroom. And now a friend-turned-killer takes betrayal to a horrifying new level, right in the middle of a vigil.
4 years after Delia Johnson was gunned down on a Brooklyn sidewalk, her killer has been sentenced.
She killed her own childhood friend, and she did it at a candlelight vigil, surrounded by people who had come together to mourn someone else. And then she came back to the very same scene, as if nothing had happened. On August 4th, 2021, the streets of Crown Heights, Brooklyn were filled with grief. A group of friends and family had gathered for a vigil to honor someone they had lost. Among the crowd was 46-year-old Claudia Banton and her longtime friend, 42-year-old Delia Johnson. But instead of comfort, that night would turn into tragedy. Surveillance video shows that as Johnson stood talking with friends, Banton walked up behind her. Without warning, she pulled out a gun and shot Delia in the head. Johnson collapsed to the ground as the crowd screamed and scattered in panic. It took 4 months before Banton was tracked down, all the way in Florida, where she was finally arrested and brought back to Brooklyn to face trial. Prosecutors revealed that Banton fired at least 5 more shots into Johnson before fleeing in a waiting car. The killing stunned the community. How could a woman turn on someone she once called a friend? A multi-state manhunt soon followed. In court, prosecutors called it a cold-blooded execution. They reminded the jury that Banton made certain Johnson would not survive, striking her down in front of grieving mourners. The attack, carried out at a vigil, left the neighborhood in shock. What drove her to it? To this day, no clear motive has been publicly confirmed. What is known is that the two women share a long history. Johnson's mother even said she once thought of Claudia like a daughter. That betrayal made the crime even more painful for those left behind. Following a jury trial, Claudia Banton was found guilty of second-degree murder and second-degree criminal possession of a weapon. The judge sentenced her to 23 years to life in prison. However, she had no remorse for her actions. In court, Delia Johnson's family poured out their heartbreak. Johnson's sister admitted she wished the sentence had been harsher, but she chose to focus on forgiveness, hoping for change instead of more bitterness.
I feel she deserved more, but today is about changing. Today is about forgiving.
A friendship destroyed, a life stolen, and still no remorse shown. But our next case reveals that even age cannot temper pitiless vengeance this time. A mother turning on her own son.
I don't know. He was ending my life.
She was 92 years old. Her victim was her own son. And when police asked why, she said, "He was ending my life, so I'm taking his." This is the case of Anna Mae Blessing. On July 2, 2018, in Fountain Hills, Arizona, police received a chilling emergency call from a woman, her voice trembling, urgency laced with fear. Anna Mae lived in the same house with her 72-year-old son and his girlfriend, but the air had grown thick with tension. For days, arguments had simmered beneath the surface. Her son had made it clear he wanted her to move into an assisted living home, saying she had become too difficult to live with. To Anna Mae, it felt like betrayal, losing her independence, losing control of her own life. That morning, Anna Mae hid 2 pistols in the pockets of her robe. One was a revolver she had owned since the 1970s, the other a gift from her late husband. Police records later revealed what happened next. She walked into her son's bedroom, where he was with his girlfriend. An argument started. Words turned into conflict. Anna Mae pulled out the first revolver and fired. Her son was shot twice in the neck and jaw. When she turned the gun on his girlfriend, the woman fought back and managed to wrestle it away. But Anna Mae wasn't finished. She reached for her second pistol. Another struggle, another terrifying moment. Somehow, the girlfriend knocked that gun away too and escaped, calling the sheriff's office. When deputies arrived, Anna Mae was sitting calmly in her recliner. She told them her reason. She believed her son was taking away her life by forcing her into a care home, so she decided to take his life. She even admitted she had planned to kill herself afterward. She said,
I bent over and took his pulse, and there was no pulse, so I knew I killed him.
Anna Mae Blessing was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and kidnapping. Her bail was set at $500,000, but she never faced trial. In November 2019, she suffered a stroke, and by January 2020, she had passed away in hospice care. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office later dismissed all charges. There would be no formal sentencing. Next up, once cheered on Sundays, Eric Naposki became infamous in court, accused of gunning down a millionaire in cold blood.
I am exposing myself, I'm exposing my family, I am exposing my children.
A wealthy businessman, a secret love affair, and a former NFL player who thought he could get away with murder. But the truth would surface years later, leading to one of California's most shocking courtroom moments. In December 1994, millionaire investor Bill McLaughlin was enjoying life in his luxury Newport Beach home. But behind the gates of his community, danger was closing in. His girlfriend, Nanette Johnston, had secretly been seeing someone else, former football player Eric Naposki. Together, the two began plotting a deadly plan, one driven by money and betrayal. That winter night, McLaughlin was shot multiple times inside his home. At first, the case went cold. Investigators had no weapon, no DNA, and no direct witnesses. For years, suspicion hung in the air, but without solid proof, an arrest was impossible. Then, 15 years later, a cold case detective uncovered new evidence tying Nanette and Eric to the murder. Overnight, a case long buried in silence erupted back to life. In May 2009, police arrested Naposki in Connecticut. He was charged with first-degree murder. The trial was explosive. Witnesses described how Nanette lured McLaughlin with promises of love while secretly plotting with Naposki. The couple hoped to walk away with millions in insurance money.
Well, today a jury disagreed with that and found Naposki guilty of murder for financial gain.
At the heart of it all was greed. Nanette stood to inherit more than $2.5 million from McLaughlin's life insurance and savings. For Naposki, it was the chance to share the wealth while eliminating the man who stood in his way. However, Naposki repeatedly denied committing the crime. He said,
If I was never there, and if I was never in the house, ever, how did I commit a crime?
In 2011, an Orange County jury found Eric Naposki guilty of first-degree murder. The following year, he received the maximum sentence, life in prison without parole. He displayed no emotion for his actions, just a cold, unsettling smile as the sentence was handed down. Nanette was also convicted and sentenced to life. Both would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Someone from the victim's family said,
That's a lie, Eric.
A man who had worked hard to build his fortune was betrayed most cruelly by the woman he trusted and the man she secretly loved. A millionaire's life was stolen for greed, But our next case takes darkness to another level, where a bodybuilder's marriage, once built on strength, ended in gunfire on Valentine's Day.
Killed the man that I loved the most in the world.
Valentine's Day, 1995. A night meant for love ended in tragedy. A champion bodybuilder was found wounded in his own home, and the woman behind the trigger was no stranger. She was his wife, Sally McNeil. This is the shocking story of how a marriage built on strength collapsed into conflict, and how one woman's claim of self-defense became one of the most controversial killing cases in bodybuilding history. Sally McNeil wasn't a stranger to hardship. Growing up in Pennsylvania, she lived in a home marked by mistreatment and chaos in her house. Later, she joined the Marines, rising to the rank of sergeant, but her temper often got her into trouble. In the late 1980s, she met Ray McNeil, a rising star in bodybuilding. The two shared dreams of fame, but their marriage quickly turned toxic. Sally accused Ray of treating her and her children unfairly, saying his actions caused her serious harm. His use of performance-enhancing substances only made his behavior worse. However, Ray had his own version. He told friends Sally was aggressive, jealous, and unpredictable. The couple's fights became the talk of their community, and yet they stayed together, trapped in a cycle of love and rage. On Valentine's Day 1995, in Oceanside, California, near San Diego, everything came crashing down. Sally dialed emergency services, her voice trembling, saying,
"I just shot my husband because he just beat me up."
When police arrived, they found Ray still alive but gravely wounded. He had been shot once in the abdomen and once in the face. Blood covered the living room. The children were in the apartment when it happened, terrified. At the hospital, doctors tried to save him, but Ray died 2 hours later. Police immediately turned to Sally. Her story was simple. She claimed Ray attacked her, and she grabbed the shotgun in self-defense. But investigators weren't convinced. The crime scene told a different story. Forensic evidence showed Sally shot Ray, left the room, reloaded her gun, and came back to fire again. Blood spatter on a nearby lamp didn't match her story of a struggle, and the angle of the shots raised questions. One appeared to have been fired while Ray was already down. Prosecutors argued that this wasn't self-defense, but rather revenge. A violent marriage had finally exploded, and Sally pulled the trigger twice to make sure Ray was dead. Why would Sally do it? Her defense team argued that years of mistreatment drove her to fear for her life. They said she suffered from battered woman syndrome. Her daughter even testified she heard Ray choking her mother through the door that night. But the prosecution pointed to a different motive: jealousy, rage, and a marriage falling apart. On that very Valentine's Day, Ray had plans with another woman. He was preparing to leave Sally behind, and they believed she snapped. In 1996, the jury delivered its verdict. Sally McNeil was guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. However, she froze when the verdict was read. Her legal battle didn't end there. Appeals went up and down the courts for years, but her conviction stood. She served her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility. Then, in 2020, after nearly 25 years behind bars, Sally was granted parole. Today, she lives a private life, far away from the spotlight that once followed her every move. In an interview, she said,
I killed him because I was protecting myself. He was trying to kill me.
This case still divides people. Some see Sally as a battered wife who finally fought back. Others argue Sally is not the perfect victim.
Sally is not the perfect victim. Sometimes I was swayed to believe in her innocence.
Others believe she was a violent woman who planned her husband's murder. In the end, one fact remains unshakable. 2 children lost their father, and their lives were forever scarred. A love story gone dark, a family torn apart. But our next case isn't about romance, it's about recklessness. One night of speed, alcohol, and a fiery crash that left no survivors.
We have new surveillance footage you will only see on Channel 8, capturing the intense speed Henry Ruggs was driving just moments before that deadly crash.
When Henry Ruggs walked into the courtroom, he was no longer the NFL star with fame and fortune. He was a young man facing the family of the woman he killed in a fiery crash. One night of drinking and speeding at 156 miles per hour had taken the life of 23-year-old Tina Tinter. Now Ruggs stood in front of the judge, admitting guilt, apologizing, and wishing he could turn back time. But no apology could undo the tragedy. That night, Ruggs made a deadly choice. Instead of staying off the road, he got into his Corvette after drinking. Police later discovered he was driving at a shocking 156 miles per hour. Just seconds later, he slammed into the back of another car. Inside that car was 23-year-old Tina Tintor, and with her, the crash caused flames to spread instantly. Tina never made it out alive. The crash became headline news across the nation. Ruggs, who had been drafted by the Raiders only a year earlier, was suddenly at the center of a criminal investigation. Officers revealed his alcohol level was far above the legal limit. Investigators pieced together the evidence: speed, alcohol, impact, and there was no doubt. Ruggs' reckless actions had taken an innocent life. Hours after the crash, the Raiders released him from the team. The courtroom became the turning point. Ruggs stood before the judge and before Tina's grieving family. He said he never planned to drive that night. He said he wished he could turn back time. But no words could erase the horror of that night. He pleaded guilty to DUI, resulting in death and misdemeanor manslaughter. There was no hidden plot, no plan, just reckless decisions fueled by alcohol, poor judgment, and speed. Ruggs was escaping something that night because of pressure, emotions, but the cost was unbearable. In 2023, the court sentenced him to 3 to 10 years in prison. At the time of sentencing, he felt guilty for his actions and apologized to the family of the victim, saying,
I apologize for the pain and suffering my actions the morning of November 2nd, 2021 have caused you, your family, and those who knew and loved Miss Tina at Max.
Meanwhile, Tina Tintor's family is left with a loss that no sentence can heal. Ruggs has since spoken publicly. He said he was sorry. He even dreams of returning to football someday, but apologies cannot bring back Tina. They cannot erase the pain of her family. Her family said,
"Every parent's worst nightmare is to create a beautiful child just to have them taken away at the hands of another's negligence."
One choice behind the wheel ended a young woman's life. But our next case shows how an NFL star made the same mistake, with deadly consequences on a Miami morning.
Something that will live with me for the rest of my life. It's something that I'm going to have to tell my children about.
A star NFL wide receiver, a luxury car, a night of drinking. By the next morning, one man was dead, and Dante Stallworth's football career was destroyed forever. On March 14, 2009, just after sunrise, Stallworth was driving his black Bentley on the MacArthur Causeway in Miami Beach. He was speeding, going about 50 in a 40-mile zone. On the same road was Mario Reyes, a 59-year-old man walking home after finishing his overnight shift. He was simply trying to catch a bus. That morning, their lives collided. Literally. Stallworth struck Reyes with his car. Mario died instantly. When police arrived, Stallworth admitted he had been drinking the night before. His alcohol level was tested. It came back at 0.12, well above the legal limit. Witnesses said he had tried flashing his headlights to warn Mario, but it was too late. Stallworth was arrested, and the case quickly made national headlines.
Respectfully object to the modification. He's in a position now where he can...
On April 1st, 2009, prosecutors charged him with DUI manslaughter. He surrendered the next day and was released on bail. The once celebrated athlete now stood in a courtroom, facing years behind bars. The evidence was clear: speeding, alcohol, and a man killed on his way home. This was not a case of hate or rage. It was a case of reckless choices. A night of drinking, a decision to drive, and a man paid the ultimate price. Under a plea deal, Stallworth avoided a long prison sentence. Instead, he received 30 days in jail, 1,000 hours of community service, 2 years of community control, and 8 years of probation. At the time of sentencing, he said,
Though I cannot bring back Mr. Reyes or ease his family's pain, I can and will honor his memory by committing my time, my resources, and my voice to educating this community.
His driver's license was permanently suspended. He served just 24 days of his 30-day sentence before being released. The Reyes family also reached a private settlement with Stallworth to avoid a civil suit. For the family of Mario Reyes, no settlement could ever replace a husband and father. For Stallworth, his NFL career was shattered. The league suspended him for the entire 2009 season. A single decision erased years of hard work. But our next case isn't about money. It's about rage, a baseball star, and a bat that turned into a weapon of death.
Because the defendant is presumed to be innocent, he does not have to prove that he is not guilty.
This case is shocking. A young athlete with a bright future turned into a brutal killer. A man who once dreamed of making it big in Major League Baseball destroyed his own family with a bat that had his name on it. Brandon Martin, a first-round pick for the Tampa Bay Rays, was once seen as a rising star. But in 2015, everything changed. Instead of chasing baseball dreams, he left behind a trail of conflict that stunned California and the sports world. It all happened inside his family's home. His father, his uncle, and even a security worker were dreadfully beaten to death. The weapon? A baseball bat engraved with his last name. The very thing that once represented his future became the tool of destruction. When police learned what had happened, they launched a massive search. Martin didn't surrender. He ran. He jumped from a second-story window and tried to hide in a stranger's backyard. But a police dog took him down, ending the chase. During the investigation, disturbing details came out. Just days before the murders, Martin admitted to choking his mother, threatening her with scissors, and putting her in a headlock. He also confessed to punching his father. The warning signs were there, but no one could imagine the horror that was coming. Reports suggest Martin was struggling with psychiatric issues, but the reasons for the murders went far beyond a simple explanation. He turned his anger and instability on the very people who loved him most. The case proceeded to trial, and following testimony from his girlfriend, the prosecutor became aware of critical information. According to his girlfriend,
things just slowly started to really change in his temperament, his personality, his choices he made.
Later, prosecutors revealed that he was diagnosed with the mood disorder, and he was provided medication to treat that illness. So prosecutors even sought the death penalty. But in the end, Martin was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He will never walk free again.
At this time, the court will sentence the defendant on count 1, 2, and 3 to life without the possibility of parole.
This tragedy is haunting. A family wiped out. A career wasted. Brandon Martin went from a baseball prospect to a convicted killer. The next case shows how quickly fame can turn to infamy. Tammy Lynn Sitch once lit up arenas, and now she faces the consequences of a crime that took a life.
Tammy! Turn the car off!
My dad loved us with everything he had, and we miss him every day.
The daughter of 75-year-old Julian LaFrancis Lassiter, known as Fran, speaking out after the woman accused of ending his life by driving drunk.
She was once a wrestling icon, a WWE Hall of Famer known as Sunny. But years after her time in the spotlight, Tammy Lynn Sitch's life spiraled into a series of legal troubles, ultimately leading to a devastating crime that ended one life and changed hers forever.
Yeah, that's the caller.
What she has to say.
All right. You got your license on you, Tammy? What?
No, I don't.
You don't?
On March 25, 2022, in Daytona Beach, Florida, Sitch was driving under the influence when she crashed into another vehicle at a red light. The impact instantly killed 75-year-old Julian Lassiter, a man who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Authorities immediately suspected intoxication, and when Sitch's blood alcohol level was tested, she was found to be 3.5 times the legal limit. Even worse, she had a history of DUI-related arrests, making this a deadly pattern rather than an isolated mistake.
Oh God, my fucking fiance's. Look at this, a novel.
Well, don't worry about that right now. Just
No.
Yeah, that's the difference. So you could deal with that another day.
Sitch was arrested and charged with DUI manslaughter, along with multiple other counts, including driving with a suspended license. Prosecutors painted a picture of a reckless repeat offender who had ignored past warnings and continued putting others in danger.
What did she tell Detective Garcia?
The defendant told Detective Garcia that she was unaware that she had been involved in a crash.
In court, the reality of her actions hit hard. The prosecution played footage of the crash, showing just how avoidable the tragedy had been. The defense attempted to argue mitigating factors, citing her history of personal struggles, but the evidence was overwhelming.
Facts of this case are fairly egregious. She runs a red light just prior to this accident, almost causes another accident, slams into the back of this decedent, Mr. Lassiter, so hard that he hits the car in front of him.
The judge had little sympathy, and when it came time for sentencing, the courtroom held its breath.
Because this is Sunny Sitch today. Monday, actually. This was her walking into a courtroom to face a Florida judge and receive a 17-year prison sentence.
Tammy Lynn Sitch was sentenced to 17 years in prison, a harsh but expected punishment given her long history of DUI arrests. The judge made it clear this wasn't just about one mistake, but a repeated pattern of reckless behavior that finally cost someone their life.
It's when I sit alone thinking about what I did to the Lassiter family that tragic day. From a stupid decision, I feel the regret and remorse deep inside my soul.
Sitch broke down in court, apologizing and saying she never meant for this to happen. But for Julian Lassiter's family, her words meant little. His loved ones described their devastating loss, stating that nothing could bring him back, and that this tragedy could have been prevented if Sitch had learned from her past mistakes.
Every day since my dad has been taken from us has been incredibly difficult. I wish we had a different outcome today.
Even behind bars, Sitch has remained in the headlines, requesting a reduced sentence. But so far, the courts have denied every attempt. For the wrestling legend, once known as Sunny, her days of fame are long over. Our next case is one of the most infamous in American history. O.J. Simpson's murder trial captivated the world and divided it forever.
O.J. killed everybody in that driveway. Let's just, to hell with all this. O.J. killed both them people.
Simpson could not stay out of trouble.
Okay.
Simpson had an active social life and lots of friends. But on at least 4 occasions, cops were called to break up disputes between Simpson and his new girlfriend, Christy Prody.
O.J. Simpson was a sports legend, a Hollywood celebrity, and a household name. But in 1994, his reputation shattered overnight when he became the prime suspect in one of the most infamous murder cases in history.
A passerby discovered the victims on the floor, Brown Simpson at the foot of the courtyard stairs, and Goldman nearby, close to some vegetation. The murders would become one of the most notorious crimes in recent U.S. history.
On June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were brutally murdered outside Nicole's home in Brentwood, California. Nicole was stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed, and Ron was viciously attacked. The crime scene was gruesome. Investigators quickly turned to O.J., Nicole's ex-husband and former NFL star. Their marriage had been volatile, with multiple reports of Friends and family recalled O.J.'s obsessive behavior, his jealousy, and how he couldn't accept Nicole moving on. Just 2 years after their divorce in 1992, Nicole had started dating again, and O.J. wasn't handling it well. Prosecutors argued that he saw Nicole's new life as an insult, a final loss of control, and that rage boiled over on that fateful night. As evidence piled up, things took a bizarre turn. Instead of turning himself in, O.J. led police on a slow-speed chase across Los Angeles in his white Ford Bronco, a live, televised event watched by 95 million people. When he finally surrendered, the case became a spectacle. His bloody glove, shoe prints matching the crime scene, and history of violence all pointed to guilt. But his high-powered defense team flipped the trial into a battle of race, police corruption, and fame, shifting focus away from the brutal murders. After 11 months of trial, the jury delivered its verdict on October 3, 1995. Not guilty. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Millions celebrated, while others were stunned, believing a killer had just walked free.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
Across the nation and around the world, virtually everyone watched as Judgment Day came swiftly for O.J. Simpson.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
Years later, O.J. wouldn't stay out of trouble. In 2007, he was arrested again, this time for armed robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas. And in 2008, he was sentenced to 33 years in prison, finally facing justice, but for an entirely different crime.
O.J. Simpson stood shackled and stone-faced as a Las Vegas judge sentenced him for a hotel armed robbery.
The first-degree kidnapping with use of a deadly weapon, a fixed term of 15 years, parole eligibility beginning after 5 years.
Nicole Brown Simpson's family sat in disbelief as O.J. walked free, unable to find closure. For them, this wasn't just about a high-profile case. It was about justice for Nicole and Ron.
I will forever be proud of my son and my family. Thank you.
The public remained divided. Some saw Simpson as a victim of racial bias in a legal system. Others believed he got away with murder. The case forever changed how America saw celebrity justice, proving that when fame, power, and legal strategy collide, the truth can get buried beneath the headlines. O.J. Simpson's trial was one of the most divisive in history, but the next case is just as shocking. A world-class athlete, once celebrated as an inspiration, fell from grace in the most unthinkable way.
In his own country, he is a superstar like no other.
He was the guy that defeated all the odds.
When he ran, he set the track on fire.
He wasn't just running to run, he was running to win.
For years, Oscar Pistorius was a global inspiration, a double amputee sprinter who defied the odds to compete against able-bodied athletes. The Blade Runner was a hero, a symbol of perseverance, until a single night shattered his legacy forever. In the early hours of Valentine's Day 2013, a series of gunshots rang out inside his Pretoria home. His girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, was dead, and Pistorius? He claimed it was a terrible mistake. But as investigators dug deeper, the truth became harder to ignore.
Early Thursday morning, neighbors in his exclusive gated community heard commotion and gunshots.
At this stage, we can confirm that a young woman, a 30-year-old woman, did die on the scene.
Pistorius told police he had mistaken Riva for an intruder. He claimed he heard noises coming from the bathroom, panicked, and fired 4 shots through the locked door, only realizing afterward that Riva was inside.
Did Pistorius know who was behind the bathroom door as he unloaded his gun? Or was he simply a man trying to protect himself and the one he loved from an intruder?
But the evidence didn't add up. Neighbors reported hearing a woman screaming before the gunshots, suggesting a heated argument had taken place. Ballistics showed Riva had been crouching behind the toilet, not standing or approaching the door. And then there was the history of jealousy and control. Messages revealed arguments between the couple, with Riva admitting she was scared of him at times.
After you fired the first shot, did she scream?
Not my lady.
Are you sure?
Yes, my lady.
Would you have heard her?
I don't think I would have heard it. There was a gunshot that went off, my lady. My ears were ringing.
Was this truly a case of mistaken identity, or a crime of passion fueled by rage? The trial gripped the world. South Africa's most celebrated athlete was now on trial for murder, breaking down in tears as the courtroom replayed the sounds of Riva's final moments. His defense team pushed the narrative of fear and paranoia, arguing that Pistorius believed an intruder had entered his home, and that, as a man with disabilities, he felt vulnerable.
One of the world's most recognizable athletes on the planet right now arrived at court under a blanket. A visibly humbled Oscar Pistorius faced the cameras again to hear the main police investigating officer say he didn't believe his explanation.
But the prosecution fought back hard, painting Pistorius as reckless and prone to violent outbursts. Then came the shocking twist. He was convicted, but not for murder. In 2014, Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide, the South African equivalent of manslaughter, and sentenced to 5 years in prison.
In the result, the sentence that I impose on the accused for the murder dolus eventualis of the deceased, that is Riva Steenkamp, is 6 years imprisonment.
The world was stunned, but it wasn't over. The prosecution appealed, arguing the conviction was far too lenient. In 2015, the Supreme Court overturned the manslaughter verdict and convicted Pistorius of murder instead. His sentence was increased to 6 years, but even that was met with outrage. Finally, in 2017, after yet another appeal, the sentence was doubled to 13 years and 5 months, bringing an end to one of the most infamous trials in modern history.
A South African court more than doubled the prison sentence originally imposed on Paralympic gold medalist Oscar Pistorius.
This court determined that the respondent, Mr. Pistorius, should have been sentenced to 15 years imprisonment.
Pistorius served time in Kosi Mampuru II prison, reportedly leading a quiet and religious life behind bars. Then, in January 2024, he was granted parole after serving half his sentence, a decision that left Riva's family devastated. In court, Pistorius was visibly shaken during sentencing, his once dominant presence reduced to a broken man. Riva's family, however, sat in silent grief. No amount of time would bring her back. Her mother, June Steenkamp, later said, "We're the ones serving a life sentence." As Pistorius walked out of prison in 2024, the world was left with one haunting question: was justice truly served? Our next case involves a football star with a multi-million-dollar career cut short by murder. Aaron Hernandez went from the New England Patriots to life behind bars.
With the firearm in his hand. Before he fired the gun, he was like, "What's up now?" And he started firing shots. He said to me, "Did I see that?" And I said no. He said, "I hit one in the head and one in the chest."
Aaron Hernandez was once a rising star in the NFL. Born in 1989 in Connecticut, he was a talented football player who played for the Florida Gators in college, and then for the New England Patriots. Everyone thought he was on the path to greatness, but behind the fame and glory, a darker story was unfolding. Despite his success on the field, Hernandez struggled with many personal problems. Growing up, he faced a tough childhood, dealing with family troubles, mistreatment, and trauma. As he grew older, he also had issues with substance use and anger. These struggles began to affect his life off the field in dangerous ways.
And leads them through the house, telling them to be quiet.
In 2013, things took a serious turn. Hernandez was arrested and charged with the killing of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player connected to Hernandez's fiance's family. The police launched a big investigation. Hernandez was released by the Patriots right after his arrest. While waiting for trial, he faced other charges as well, but was only convicted for Lloyd's murder.
Indicate that there was some encounter between the defendant and the victims in this case? Doesn't that almost knock out of the park all this nonsense about whether or not this could have happened in 9 minutes?
The trial showed the shocking side of Hernandez's life. The evidence convinced the jury of his guilt. In 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. This ended his promising football career and marked a sad fall from fame. The motive behind the killing seemed tied to jealousy and fear. Lloyd was dating Hernandez's fiance's sister, and tensions grew. Hernandez's troubled past and struggles with emotions may have also played a role in the tragedy.
Guilty of murder in the first degree.
Madam Foreperson, by which theory or theories?
In 2017, 5 days after being found not guilty of another double homicide case, Hernandez was found dead in his prison cell. Later, doctors diagnosed him with a brain condition called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, caused by repeated head injuries in football. Some believe this condition may have affected his behavior. It's heartbreaking to see a life filled with so much promise end in such tragedy. His story reminds us to look more closely at mental health and the challenges that can hide beneath the surface. Even those who seem to have everything, fame, talent, and money, can face profound personal struggles. Next up, trust turned into tragedy. Javier de la Rosa proved just how far someone will go when violence becomes the answer.
The evidence that they have, she was, her death was premeditated. They damaged her. They just threw her there and left her at the park. And he was 48 stabs.
The jury listened in silence. The words were final. 90 years in prison. In front of them sat Javier de la Rosa, once a teenage football player. A young love story turned into a nightmare. A star athlete. A beautiful girl is starting her senior year. But one summer evening in Texas, it ended with 48 stab wounds and a shocking betrayal. On August 25, 2010, 17-year-old Tiffany Galvin was reported missing by her family in Brownsville, Texas. She was just starting her senior year at Los Fresnos High School. Hours later, her body was found in a park, stabbed 48 times. The brutality shocked the community. A young girl full of dreams was taken in such a violent way. Investigators quickly turned their attention to Tiffany's ex-boyfriend, Javier de la Rosa Jr. He was only 16 at the time and played football for Brownsville Lopez High School. Police believe the stabbing happened during an attempted robbery and abduction. The evidence pointed to Javier, and within weeks a judge made the decision. He would be tried as an adult. When the case went to trial, the details were chilling. Prosecutors revealed how Tiffany had fought for her life as Javier stabbed her again and again. The jury heard that the two had broken up just 3 weeks before the murder. It wasn't just a crime of passion. It was an explosion of conflict. Why did Javier do it? The indictment claimed it happened during an attempted robbery and abduction, but many believed it was fueled by jealousy, anger, and the inability to let Tiffany move on with her life. In March, Javier pleaded guilty. The jury deliberated for 5 hours, over 2 days, before announcing the sentence, 90 years in prison. However, he chose to remain silent while the verdict was read. Prosecutors had asked for life. His lawyers asked for just 20. In the end, the court delivered a punishment that reflected the horror of Tiffany's death. Javier will be eligible for parole after 30 years. For Tiffany's family, no sentence could ever fill the void. A daughter, a sister, a friend. Her future was stolen before it even began. On the other hand, the prosecutor said to the media reports,
I feel that justice was done. I feel a great amount of sorrow for the Galvans.
Javier's obsession ended a young life. But our next teen thought he could outrun justice, and instead, he ran straight into a family's worst nightmare.
You know, so many people in the community are affected by this tragic loss at the decision of a 16-year-old who decided to flee from police.
He thought he could outrun the police, but in just seconds, one reckless choice shattered an entire family. Inside the courtroom, the judge's voice cut through the silence.
All you had to do was stop. That's it. You literally wiped out a family.
August 12, 2023, Sterling Heights, Michigan. At just 16 years old, Travion Smith was behind the wheel of a car he shouldn't have been driving. That night, police noticed something simple. His vehicle had no insurance. They tried to pull him over. Instead of stopping, Travion hit the gas. He sped through a red light at 93 miles per hour. In that moment, everything changed. Travion's car slammed into another vehicle. Inside were Norman and Faith Gumma, along with their 2-year-old son. The impact was devastating. Faith, pregnant with the couple's second child, died instantly. Norman survived, but was left completely paralyzed and unable to speak. Their little boy was badly hurt, but in time he recovered. Travion, he walked away without a single scratch. The police were stunned. No substance, no guns, nothing illegal inside the car. Just a teenager running from a traffic ticket that could have been handled in minutes. When officers confronted him, Travion's mugshot showed something chilling. He appeared to be smiling. So why did Travion run? No clear reason was ever given. He later told the court,
I'm kind of nervous. I didn't commit any crimes. I truly don't even understand why they followed me in the first place, Your Honor. I am not a murderer of any kind.
But prosecutors disagreed. His reckless choices had cost 2 lives and destroyed 3 more. Travion Smith was charged with second-degree murder, reckless driving causing serious injury, and fleeing police. At 18 years old, he was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison. However, he showed no emotion for what he did and remained stone-faced. The prosecutor's words were clear. When you choose to run from the police, you will walk to jail. A young mother, a husband who will never walk or speak again. A little boy forced to grow up without the life he once knew. Now, a teenager serving decades with nothing left but time to think about what he's done. One moment of recklessness tore a family apart. Our next case explores how a 13-year-old school day erupted into chaos, ending a life before it truly began.
Things I miss most is the freedom to do what I want when I want. I have to sit with that on my conscience each and every day.
A 13-year-old boy, the last day of school. One gunshot echoed through the hallway. By the end of the day, a beloved teacher was dead, and the boy's childhood was gone forever. On May 26, 2000, the last day of school at Lake Worth Middle School in Florida, students were ready to celebrate summer. But for 13-year-old Nathaniel Brazil, the day would end in tragedy. Earlier that afternoon, Nathaniel was sent home for misbehavior, throwing water balloons. Frustrated, he went back to his house, grabbed a .25 caliber handgun, and returned to the school. Then, in the hallway, he confronted his English teacher, Barry Grunau, a man known for kindness and discipline. Nathaniel raised the gun and fired a single shot into his teacher's head. The entire school erupted in panic. Teachers rushed to protect students. One of the students said,
You pulled the trigger back? He pulled the trigger back and shot Mr. Grunau.
Barry Grunau was his favorite teacher, the one who encouraged him despite his struggles. Why would a 13-year-old kill someone he admired? Police arrived within minutes. Students pointed them to Nathaniel, who still had the weapon. He also threatened another teacher with the weapon, but didn't pull the trigger again. When questioned, he showed little understanding of the gravity of what he had done. The investigation uncovered a troubled home life, household mistreatment, substance problems, and police visits were common in his family. But even so, nothing excused what had happened that day. Nathaniel Brazil was arrested and charged as an adult. In court, prosecutors argued that he intentionally shot his teacher in anger after being disciplined. Brazil also said that,
I pulled the trigger, but I did not intentionally pull the trigger.
The jury, however, didn't find enough evidence for premeditated murder. Instead, they convicted him of second-degree murder and aggravated assault. Nathaniel's exact motive remains debated. Some say it was a mix of immaturity, frustration, and easy access to a weapon. Others believe he never fully understood the finality of death. But in the end, one fact was undeniable. His actions left a family without a husband and father. Nathaniel received 28 years incarceration, with 7 years probation to follow. He'll spend most of his life behind bars for a decision made at just 13 years old. While incarcerated, Nathaniel earned his GED and trained as a paralegal. His release date is set for May 18, 2028. For Barry Grenough's family, the loss was unbearable. His wife, Pam, fought legal battles against the gun seller, the school board, and even the manufacturer. Though some settlements were reached, no amount of money could bring her husband back. A classroom lost a teacher. A family lost a loved one. A teacher was killed by a boy who barely understood death. Next, a simple burglary spirals out of control, claiming a friend's life and leaving the law to weigh guilt and innocence alike.
Very hopeful that the judge will send my son home soon.
A group of teens breaks into homes. A burglary gone wrong. A police shootout. One young life ends that night. But another boy will carry the weight of it for decades. In 2015, 5 teenagers set out on a dangerous plan in Millbrook, Alabama. They were breaking into homes, looking for things to steal. But what began as reckless mischief turned into something far more serious. Police were called to the scene, and in the chaos, 16-year-old Adante Washington, one of Lakeith's friends, was shot and killed in the exchange. The officer who fired the shot was later cleared of any wrongdoing. But what shocked many was what happened next.
I understand they was wrong for breaking into the house, but you didn't have to shoot him.
Under Alabama's felony murder law, if someone dies during a felony, everyone involved can be held responsible for that death, even if they didn't pull the trigger. So instead of going home that night, Lakeith Smith and the other teens faced charges for the murder of their own friend. The case went to trial. Lakeith, just a teenager himself, stood in front of the court accused of murder. The evidence was clear. They had broken into homes, and that led to the deadly chain of events. The jury didn't hesitate. He was convicted. Lakeith never intended for his friend to die that night, but the law didn't see it that way. Their decision to commit burglary set everything in motion, and the punishment was severe. Lakeith was sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, he showed no remorse for what he did, a sentence that many felt was harsh for a teenager. Now, years later, his attorneys are fighting for a new sentencing hearing. They argue that he deserves another chance, but as of now, the judge has not made a decision. For the family of Adante Washington, nothing can undo the pain of losing a son. For Lakeith, each day behind bars is a reminder of one terrible night. A single night of poor choices, shattered lives. But our next case shows a routine high school meetup spiraled into taking a life, exposing the chilling coldness of planning among teens.
I was just, walking, looking down, and just waiting, and I hear a gunshot.
It began as a normal day in East Kentwood High. A text message, a meeting. Moments later, a 17-year-old's life ended with a single shot. James King, a student with his whole future ahead of him, never imagined that a supposed marijuana deal would turn deadly. On January 13, 2025, James arranged to meet someone near 44th Street and Kalamazoo Avenue, a decision that would change everything. But what should have been a routine meeting turned into a dreadful trap. 17-year-old Israel Valdez allegedly pulled the trigger, striking James in the head. In an instant, his friends were left trapped in the chaos. Investigators quickly uncovered the chilling plan. 2 of the teens involved, Ahmed Hassan and Alana Claflin-Gallegos, later testified against Valdez. Claflin-Gallegos revealed that the night before, she and Valdez had talked about robbing someone for illegal substances. The next day, Valdez contacted James on Facebook to set up a meeting. Even though Claflin-Gallegos called off the robbery, Valdez went ahead. Hassan testified that he tried to get out of the car to let James in safely, only to hear gunshots moments later from 50 to 100 meters away. Detectives also found that the teens had tried to destroy their phones by running one over and dunking another in a drink. Still, the messages were recovered, showing clear discussions about acquiring a weapon, bullets, and their intentions. At the meeting, Valdez allegedly demanded to see the bag James brought. A scuffle broke out. The weapon discharged. James was thrown from the vehicle, and Valdez allegedly dumped it into a nearby sewer. The crime appears to have been motivated by money and substance. A planned robbery escalated into murder when things went horribly wrong. Valdez, Claflin Gallegos, Hassan, and Sims now face charges including open murder, assault with intent to rob, and conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Ahmed Hassan was sentenced to 5 years in prison, while Claflin received a term of 10 to 40 years. However, Claflin has shown no remorse for her actions. Even Valdez's mother, Jennifer, was charged with allegedly lying to investigators about her involvement.
Jennifer, police say you lied to them during the investigation. Is there anything you'd like to say? Do you know where your son is?
A teenager's life was cut short, leaving friends and family questioning how a simple meeting could end in tragedy. Next up, she was supposed to be focused on school, friends, and a future. Instead, Natalie Keepers was sketching out a murder plan.
I was a very lovable person. Nicole touched many people throughout her short life.
She never met the victim. She never held the weapon. Yet the jury still found her just as guilty as the killer because prosecutors said the murder wouldn't have happened without her. On January 27, 2016, 13-year-old Nicole Lovell vanished. The search for her started with hope and ended in horror. The truth exposed betrayal, a disturbing plan, and 2 college students at its center. At the center of it was not only the killer, David Eisenhower, but also his friend, 19-year-old Natalie Keepers, who would later stand trial for helping plan Nicole's death in advance. Nicole Lovell was found dead near the North Carolina border. Investigators soon discovered that her killer was David Eisenhower, a Virginia Tech student who had met Nicole online. But as the case unfolded, they also uncovered messages, surveillance footage, and other chilling evidence revealing that Natalie Keepers, someone Nicole had never even met, was deeply involved in the plot. Prosecutors argued she was far from a bystander, claiming she acted as an accessory before the fact, helping Eisenhower plan each step of the murder. Detectives pieced together a timeline using surveillance photos, GPS data, and text messages. They found a video of Eisenhower and Keepers buying a shovel together. GPS records showed her helping him choose the location where Nicole's body would be hidden. Messages between the two revealed discussions about ways to kill Nicole. Prosecutors said this was more than just talk. It was preparation for a crime. When the case went to trial, the courtroom heard both sides. The prosecution painted Keepers as someone who willingly took part in planning the murder. The defense argued she was simply playing along with Eisenhower's fantasy and never believed he would go through with it. They brought in experts to testify about her mental health, conditions like borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and dependent personality disorder, which could make her easily manipulated. But prosecutors pushed back, saying her actions showed intent, not just influence. According to the defense, Keepers had no reason to want Nicole dead. They claimed her only motive was to stay close to Eisenhower, someone she admired and wanted to please. But prosecutors argued that she knew Nicole was going to die that night and chose to help anyway. After less than 90 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of accessory before the fact to first-degree murder.
Words can't express how sorry I am. I never intended for this to happen.
The next day, they recommended her sentence. As the verdict was read, she sat motionless, her face cold, her eyes unblinking, showing not a flicker of emotion. On the other hand, Eisenhower received 50 years in prison. His apology offered little comfort compared to the weight of the sentence. The case closed with the community knowing Nicole's life had been stolen, not just by one person, but with the help of another who could have stopped it. For Nicole's family, the verdict brought some justice, but no verdict could bring their daughter back. Her mother said, "She was everything to me." One murder, planned with chilling precision and showing zero regret. Our next case investigates a jealousy so intense, it ends in a deadly rivalry.
Yeah, because I know they're going to jump me. I know Josh's family. Josh has hit me before. Josh's brother threatened to hit me before.
Two young women, one toxic love triangle, and a jealousy so intense it left one of them lying lifeless in the street. In court, the jury would hear angry voicemails, chilling threats, and details of the final confrontation that turned a rivalry into murder. Rachel Wade and Sarah Ludman weren't strangers. They were competing for the same man, Wade's ex-boyfriend, Josh Camacho. From the start, it was toxic. Public arguments, angry phone calls, and social media jabs turned their feud into a deadly battle. Wade left hurtful voicemails. Ludman showed up at Wade's workplace to taunt her, and police were called more than once. Instead of walking away, both women kept fueling the fire, and it was only a matter of time before it boiled over. On the night of April 14, 2009, tensions reached their breaking point. Wade armed herself with a steak knife before heading out. Hours later, Sarah Ludman drove to confront her rival. What happened next depends on who you believe. Wade said she was attacked first. Witnesses said Wade approached and struck without warning. What's certain is that Ludman was stabbed twice, one blow piercing her heart. She managed to call Camacho before collapsing. Police quickly arrived, spoke to witnesses, and learned of the long history of threats. Wade was taken into custody before sunrise. In court, the prosecution played voicemails, recorded months before the stabbing, in which Wade threatened to kill Ludman. Witnesses testified that Wade had approached Sarah's car and delivered the fatal blows. The defense argued self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law, claiming Wade feared for her safety, but the jury wasn't convinced. At its core, this was a jealousy-fueled confrontation.
I was upset. I was getting harassing phone calls, just like she would tell me she was gonna kick. I just retaliated and I said things. I said it out of anger.
Driven by months of bitterness over the same boyfriend, prosecutors said Wade's words and actions showed she had been planning to harm her rival long before that night. It took the jury just 2.5 hours to find Rachel Wade guilty of second-degree murder. In September 2010, she was sentenced to 27 years in state prison. She insisted she wasn't the monster everyone saw her as, yet her cold, unflinching eyes told a different story.
I'm so sorry to be the one who has caused you this great fate. I need you to know, please, that I too was just a teenage girl, not a monster and a murderer as it may seem.
For Sarah Ludman's family, the loss was devastating. A young life cut short over a relationship that, in time, might have been forgotten.
Your Honor, thank you for your time. Remember, this is my daughter. She lays in a cemetery. I go visit her there. Rachel Wade's parents can come and see her.
For Wade, the rivalry that consumed her ended with decades behind bars. Jealousy claimed one life. Anger stole another. But the next case shows a teenager armed, ruthless, and ready to take a cop's life without hesitation.
But not only did they rob him of his car, but they shot him with the revolver that they had.
On New Year's Eve 2021, off-duty Cleveland police officer Shane Bartek never made it to his celebration. Within minutes of stepping outside his apartment, he was confronted, robbed, and shot by his killer, who sped away in his car. The person behind the trigger, an 18-year-old, is already on a violent crime spree. When the jury finally heard the evidence, they didn't just see a teenager. They saw a cold-blooded killer who would never walk free again. This was not a mistake. This was murder. The girl was 18-year-old Tamara McLeod, just a teenager but already dangerous. In the weeks leading up to that night, Tamara had been involved in several armed robberies with 2 accomplices. On this night, she was armed with a revolver and ready to strike again. Outside Shane's apartment, she approached him, demanding his car. But Shane, a trained officer, wasn't willing to give up without a fight. According to investigators, Shane lunged for the weapon. In that split second, a shot rang out, hitting him. Tamara then took off in his car. Police arrived quickly, and the investigation moved fast, linking her not only to Shane's killing, but also to 4 other robberies in the preceding weeks. Detectives brought her in for questioning, where she admitted to shooting Shane and stealing his car, though she insisted it had been an accident.
I never drove this monster. Listen,
was hyper, like.
The courtroom would later hear a very different story from prosecutors. They said the evidence proved Tamara deliberately fired during the robbery, making this far more than just a tragic mistake. The jury saw it. Surveillance footage, witness accounts, and forensic details all worked against her. Her motive, investigators concluded, was simple. She wanted the car and was willing to use deadly force to get it. It wasn't desperation. It was a choice. The weeks of robberies leading up to that night painted a clear picture of someone spiraling deeper into violent crime. In the end, the jury found her guilty of aggravated murder, felonious assault, aggravated robbery, and weapons offenses. The sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, she showed no emotion for her actions. An appeals court later upheld that decision. She will never walk free again. For Shane Bartek's loved ones, the ruling brought some measure of justice. But no sentence could ever replace the young officer whose life was taken far too soon. Her mother said,
I couldn't hold my baby. I couldn't wipe away the blood on his face.
Another life stolen, another courtroom stunned. But our next case takes obsession to a horrifying new level, where a young woman turns her anger into deadly consequences for her father.
I don't know. I think it kind of made me feel like everyone was trying to make me think like I was crazy or something.
The courtroom was packed, and the story was shocking beyond words. The defendant was a young woman who once referred to her father as her best friend. She caused his slow, painful death, all because he couldn't drive her to a hair appointment before her 18th birthday. It was 2021, the day before Megan Amirowicz's 18th birthday party. She had plans, big ones. The first stop, her hair appointment. But her father, 64-year-old Konrad Amirowicz, had been drinking. He wasn't in any condition to get behind the wheel. What happened next, prosecutors argued, was fueled by pure frustration. According to investigators, while Konrad was asleep, Megan grabbed a container of lye, commonly used in drain cleaners, and poured it over him. The reaction was immediate. The chemical burned through his skin, leaving devastating injuries from head to toe. Konrad's fight to survive was nothing short of brutal. He needed kidney dialysis, a tracheotomy to help him breathe, and eventually, both of his legs were amputated. For 5 months, doctors tried everything, but his body could not recover. When he died, police built a timeline, one that pointed directly to Megan. She was arrested and charged. The trial pulled back the curtain on the horror. Jurors heard in detail how the burns destroyed Konrad's skin, how his body shut down, one organ at a time, how every surgery, every treatment was a desperate attempt to keep him alive. Prosecutors said the motive was heartbreakingly simple: anger. Anger that her plans had been ruined. Her friend said in court that her father's drinking had gotten in the way. One moment of rage, with consequences no one could undo.
Given that Konrad was laying on the couch, it was close to Konrad, is that right?
That is correct.
Could you tell what it was from where you were?
I could tell that it was liquid.
In 2023, Megan was found guilty of using harmful devices or irritants causing death. The sentencing guidelines called for over 4 years in prison, but the judge, citing her youth, immaturity, and the chance for rehabilitation, sentenced her to just 1 year in jail because she had already spent about 17 months in custody before trial, and she walked free immediately. Prosecutors were outraged, but the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld the decision, saying it was not a mistreatment of discretion. Plans ruined, lives destroyed, but the consequences don't end there. Our next case shows one night of bad decisions, leaving a community mourning, and a teenager standing stone-faced in court.
Murder deserves no leniency, Your Honor. Age is not an excuse. Gender is not a shield.
The Clark County courtroom was packed as the case unfolded. On January 2, 2024, 29-year-old Darian Gonzalez was shot and killed in his apartment during what investigators would call a robbery gone wrong. The young defendant would soon face the judge, the truth of their actions laid bare, and the consequences that could not be undone. Authorities quickly identified 6 people involved in the crime. Among them were 3 young individuals: 18-year-old Precious Dennis, 15-year-old Daisy Gonzalez, and 20-year-old Javier Galvin. Their connection to the shooting was complicated, and tensions rose as investigators pieced together what had happened. Police reports revealed that the group had been at Darian's apartment under the guise of recording music. While there, they used harmful substances and drank alcohol. During this time, some displayed weapons. Messages later revealed they planned to take Darian's rifle. 2 individuals fired shots during the robbery. Daisy claimed she was in the bathroom, while Dennis sent messages to cover up what had happened. The shooting itself was chaotic. Darian fought to protect himself, but in a matter of moments, 2 of the group's members opened fire. Lives were changed forever. The motive was primarily financial, a robbery gone wrong. The group had targeted Darian's firearm and some clothing. Their actions led to irreversible consequences. In court, the 3 young defendants took plea deals. On sentencing day, Judge Carly Kearney handed down probation instead of prison. Dennis and Daisy Gonzalez received 5 years probation, with requirements to earn a GED or high school diploma.
To probation, to share at no contact with co-defendants, no alcohol or drugs, and you are to exceed a GED or high school diploma.
However, she remained stone-faced while the verdict was read. Javier Galvin received 2 years probation and was ordered to have no contact with his brother. The judge warned him, "Good luck to all of you. You will not get a second chance." Next up, on the outside, he looked like an ordinary man. But behind locked doors, Ariel Castro kept women chained, beaten, and terrified for years.
Those orange extension cords, I was tied up like a fish, an ornament on the wall.
A friendly ride, a locked basement, a decade of horror. When Ariel Castro's secret was revealed, 3 women walked free, and the courtroom heard every chilling detail of their lost years. Between August 23, 2002 and April 21, 2004, Ariel Castro kidnapped Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus from the streets of Cleveland, Ohio. He lured them into his car and trapped them inside his home at 2207 Seymour Avenue. For more than 10 years, they lived in captivity while the world searched for answers. The women's families never gave up hope, but years went by with little progress. Amanda disappeared the day before her 17th birthday. Gina vanished at just 14. Michelle was dismissed as a runaway. Castro watched as their photos appeared on television, while he continued to control them in secret. The FBI and local police chased every tip. Their cases appeared on national shows. Yet nothing led to Castro's house. He even attended vigils and pretended to help, blending in as a grieving neighbor. Behind closed doors, however, he inflicted unspeakable mistreatment on his captives. On May 6, 2013, Amanda Berry saw her chance. Castro forgot to lock one of the doors. With her young daughter by her side, she screamed for help. Neighbors broke the door open and police rushed in. Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus were rescued within minutes. After more than a decade, freedom had finally arrived. Castro later told the court he was not a monster, blaming intimate addiction and loneliness. But prosecutors showed the truth. Years of control, conflict, and calculated cruelty. His actions had nothing to do with weakness. They were deliberate. In July 2013, Castro pleaded guilty to 937 charges, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, plus 1,000 years with no chance of parole. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, instead of showing regret, Castro claimed,
"Because there was never any evidence. And there was no evidence and never any evidence of that. But I didn't want to put these women through any more."
1 month later, he was found dead in his prison cell. In the courtroom, Michelle Knight stood face to face with her mistreater. She said,
"You will live, I will live on. You will die a little every day."
Her words marked the final chapter of his crimes, reminding the world that survival is stronger than evil. A decade of hidden torment and a predator who pretended to be a neighbor. But our next case takes horror to the next level, when the killer hides in plain sight, successful, charming, and secretly carrying a trail of bodies.
I started hearing noises, and then I heard somebody's voice, and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't breathe. I panicked. Somebody came up and asked if I was in there, and I said yeah, and they're like, "Well, we're gonna get you out."
A quiet South Carolina town, a charming real estate agent, and a man hiding unspeakable horrors. This is the case of Todd Christopher Kohlhepp. Todd Kohlhepp was born on March 7, 1971 in Florida, and grew up in South Carolina and Georgia. From a young age, he displayed troubling signs of aggression. His early life was marked by divorce, an unhealthy relationship with his stepfather, and a longing for his absent father. At just 15, Todd kidnapped and forced intimacy with a young girl in Arizona, threatening her and her family. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and registered as an intimate offender. Psychologists described him as bright but emotionally dangerous and unlikely to be rehabilitated. Despite this, after serving 14 years, he was released in 2001 and moved to South Carolina, where he appeared normal and successful. Kohlhepp built a real estate business, earned a pilot's license, and bought nearly 100 acres of land, fencing it off for privacy. But his dreadful tendencies never disappeared. In 2016, Calla Brown and her boyfriend Charles Carver went missing after visiting his property. Authorities traced their cell phone signals and found Brown chained in a storage container, while Carver had been shot and left on the property. Investigators then discovered the bodies of Johnny Joe Coxey and Megan McCraw Coxey, along with the victims of a 2003 motorcycle shop shooting. When confronted, Kohlhepp confessed to 7 murders, multiple kidnappings, and assaults. Authorities found weapons, ammunition, and chilling Amazon reviews hinting at his crimes. He also claimed he had many more victims. Kohlhepp's carefully maintained facade of normalcy had hidden years of calculated conflict. His killings were fueled by anger, control, and sadistic pleasure. Some victims were chosen for perceived disrespect, while others were opportunistic. Despite his outward charm and professional success, Kohlhepp's violent impulses remained hidden for decades. On May 26, 2017, Todd Kohlhepp pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of criminal assault. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Kohlhepp is currently imprisoned at Broad River Correctional Institution. However, he showed no emotion for his actions. He chose to remain silent. For the families of his victims, the revelations were devastating. A man who appeared normal and friendly had secretly committed unspeakable crimes, leaving grief and heartbreak in his wake. The victim's mother said,
I feel at peace. I feel a lot of peace.
A respected businessman turned serial killer. However, our next case doesn't stay hidden. It explodes live on social media, turning an entire city into a war zone.
Was on Facebook Live talking about just killing 2 people in South Memphis, and then he recorded himself shooting at someone to what appeared to be an auto zone.
A Facebook live stream, a city under lockdown, and a 19-year-old gunman turning Memphis into a war zone. By the end of the day, 3 innocent lives were gone. On September 7th, 2022, Memphis, Tennessee turned into a nightmare. 19-year-old Ezekiel Kelly began a violent spree across the city. He killed 3 people and injured 3 others. What made it worse was that he broadcasted parts of it live on Facebook for the world to see. It all started when Kelly was at a friend's house with 4 other people, including 24-year-old Dwayne Amir Tunstall. They ate together, they laughed, but then Kelly's words turned chilling. He told the group to watch this and hinted that he would kill someone. Moments later, standing next to Tunstall in the driveway, Kelly pulled out a gun and shot him dead. The friends fled, and Memphis was about to face hours of chaos. From that first killing, Kelly drove across the city, targeting strangers. At a gas station, he shot and killed 62-year-old Richard Clark. Minutes later, he shot a woman in the leg after calmly asking for directions. He live-streamed his madness, mocking his first victim, rapping, and claiming he would kill more before dying in a police shootout. The city went on lockdown. Police urged residents to shelter in place while federal agents joined the chase. Kelly's conflict escalated. At an AutoZone, he shot a man while shouting, "I'm killing for real." Hours later, he fatally shot 38-year-old Allison Parker in front of her daughter and stole her SUV. He continued carjacking, shooting, and running until police finally cornered him after a highway chase. By 9:15 that night, Kelly was under arrest. Why did he do it? According to prosecutors, Kelly had a violent history. He had already been convicted in a 2020 shooting. On live stream, he rambled about being a hitman, about substance, and about wanting to die in a shootout. His motive seemed twisted by paranoia, rage, and a hunger for attention. Kelly was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, carjacking, and terrorism. In March 2023, prosecutors announced they would pursue the death penalty. But in August 2025, Kelly pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences without parole, plus 221 years in prison. Tears began to fall from his face as the verdict was read. He said,
"I acknowledge that there's nothing I can say to neither of the victims or the victim family."
3 lives stolen, families left broken, a city scarred by fear, and all for nothing but a violent spectacle broadcast online. One man's atrocity streamed for the world to see. But in our next case, the evil was buried behind closed doors, where the stench of death revealed the truth about a monster.
Took away my daughter.
But your children will never know their grandmother and how sweet she was. She won't see me get married. She won't be there for me when I buy my first house.
The lives of families have been forever changed.
A routine traffic stop. A terrified woman was tied up in the back seat, and a foul odor is coming from a nearby house. This is the story of Stuart Weldon, a man who hid a horrifying secret. Stuart Rudolph Weldon was born on June 5, 1997, and grew up in Queens, New York, and later moved to New Jersey. Troubles seemed to follow him. Arrests for assault, weapons, and burglary marked his early life. By 2017, he moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. That's when 3 women disappeared: America Leiden, Ernestine Ryans, and Kayla Escalante. Families were desperate. The city feared a serial predator was on the loose. Authorities investigated missing persons reports, but Weldon stayed under the radar. He kidnapped and assaulted women repeatedly, leaving behind terror, but few clues. Then, on May 27, 2018, police pulled him over at a red light. In his back seat, a woman was tied up and crying for help. Weldon was arrested immediately. After his arrest, the police searched his home. Stuart's mother had reported a strange odor. Inside, authorities discovered the decomposed bodies of 3 women. Each victim had suffered a horrific mistreatment before death. The investigation revealed the full extent of Stuart Weldon's crimes. He had kidnapped, assaulted, and killed multiple women over a year. The city was shocked. His reign of terror had finally ended. Weldon's crimes were calculated. He targeted women for control, manipulation, and intimate conflict. His actions were fueled by power and deviance. Weldon faced 52 charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder. Initially pleading not guilty, he later changed his plea to guilty in September 2021. The court sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without parole. However, he remained stone-faced while the verdict was read. At the end, the prosecutor said,
"This plea and sentence are appropriate and accomplish multiple things. It ensures public safety, as Mr. Weldon will never be free to hunt in Springfield again."
Families mourned their loved ones, but justice was served. Stuart Weldon would never harm anyone again, a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind ordinary doors. 3 lives were taken, and a predator unmasked during a traffic stop. But our next case shows how conflict strikes inside a family home, leaving a young couple dead and a community in disbelief.
He's not sorry that he tortured and murdered our children. He's sorry he got caught.
A young couple, a quiet suburban home, and a night that ended in unspeakable tragedy. 5 weeks later, the verdict was clear. Guilty on all counts. Life taken. Justice served. In January 2011, 20-year-old Lisa Straub and her boyfriend, 21-year-old Johnny Clark, were found dead inside Lisa's parents' home on Longacre Lane in Springfield Township. The shocking details reveal that the couple had plastic bags over their heads, signaling a horrifying act of brutality. Authorities quickly launched an investigation into the deaths. DNA evidence played a critical role, as both Samuel Williams, 24, and 23-year-old Cameo Petaway were linked to the crime through a cigarette butt found inside the victim's home. Investigators pieced together the timeline, questioning neighbors, friends, and family to understand what led to such a brutal crime. As the case went to trial, the focus centered on Samuel Williams. The jury had to determine his involvement in a chilling string of events: kidnapping, aggravated murder, and burglary. While Petaway's charges were dismissed due to insufficient evidence, Williams' trial moved forward without the jury being informed of her acquittal. Prosecutors suggested that the attack was driven by Williams' criminal intent. though the exact motive remained tied to a mix of opportunity and conflict, leaving the community stunned and searching for answers. After careful deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. Samuel Williams was found guilty on 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of aggravated burglary. Justice had been served, but the defendant, he had no remorse or regret for his actions. The memory of Lisa Straub and Johnny Clark endures, a solemn call to value every life and remain vigilant against the darkness that sometimes lurks so close to home. One of his family members said,
"We're very happy that Samuel Williams will go to jail for the rest of his life."
Our next case begins with a college student walking home and ends in tragedy. Daniel Messel ambushed her, leaving behind a crime scene that shocked the community.
Daniel Messel has a long history of violence and alcohol problems dating back nearly 30 years, including this case from 1987.
It started with what should have been a joyous night for 22-year-old Hannah Wilson, a senior at Indiana University. It was spring 2015, and Hannah had just celebrated the end of classes with friends. But that joy turned into unspeakable horror when she disappeared after leaving a bar. Hours later, her body was found in a desolate field in Brown County, Indiana. The killer? A man whose stalking tendencies had escalated into something far more sinister. Daniel Messel. Messel, a 49-year-old with a history of violence, was no stranger to law enforcement. Investigators soon discovered a chilling connection between him and Hannah. At the crime scene, Messel's phone was found near her body, tying him directly to the murder. But this wasn't an isolated crime. Authorities uncovered a disturbing pattern. Messel had a history of preying on vulnerable women, lurking in shadows, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For Hannah, that moment came as she tried to make her way home, unknowingly crossing paths with a predator. Messel attacked her with a blunt object, causing severe trauma that ended her life. The brutality of the act shocked even seasoned detectives, but as the investigation unraveled, it became clear that this wasn't his first violent crime.
Convicted of killing IU student Hannah Wilson has begun serving 80 years in prison.
During the trial, Messel's previous behavior came into sharp focus. Witnesses revealed a man who had a penchant for stalking and harassing women, with one survivor recounting a harrowing escape years earlier. Prosecutors painted a vivid picture of a man who thrived on power and control, targeting young women like Hannah as part of his twisted routine. The courtroom was tense as graphic evidence was presented. Photos of the crime scene, paired with testimony about Hannah's final moments, left jurors visibly shaken. Messel sat stoically, his lack of remorse further enraging those in attendance. In 2016, Daniel Messel was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 80 years in prison, ensuring he would never harm another person. For Hannah's family, the sentencing was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back the bright, ambitious young woman they'd lost.
Addressing him was the hardest thing that any mother should ever have done.
Further investigations linked Messel to other unsolved crimes, with authorities suspecting him in the disappearance of Lauren Spearer, another Indiana University student who vanished in 2011. Though never formally charged in that case, Messel's predatory behavior raised questions about how many more victims he may have claimed. The courtroom during Messel's sentencing was filled with raw emotion. Hannah's mother spoke directly to the man who took her daughter's life, her words echoing in the heavy silence. "You didn't just take Hannah, you took a part of all of us." Messel, however, showed no emotion, maintaining the same detached demeanor he had displayed throughout the trial. His refusal to acknowledge the pain he caused only deepened the community's outrage. Our next case is almost beyond comprehension. Adam Matos murdered his ex-girlfriend, her new boyfriend, and her parents, wiping out nearly an entire family in one night.
Did you kill him?
Yes.
Why?
He tried to kill me.
Did Gregory Brown threaten your life?
Yes,
with a
he
rifle? Did he pull the trigger?
Yes.
On August 28, 2014, Adam Matos was arrested after a horrifying crime that left everyone deeply unsettled. He was charged with the brutal murders of his ex-girlfriend, Megan Brown, her parents, and her new boyfriend. The details of the case were horrifying, as Matos shot and beat all 4 victims before leaving his young son alone with their bodies for days. The details of the crime committed by Adam Matos are deeply unsettling. After taking the lives of Megan Brown, her parents, and her new boyfriend, Matos left his 4-year-old son alone with the bodies for several days. Only the young boy was left to witness all the scenes. The child, despite being so young, had vivid memories of the painful events. After the killings, Matos moved the bodies to a berm by the roadside, disturbing them. His actions raised suspicion when he sold the family's dogs on Craigslist and used Megan's credit card to buy pizza after the murders. These strange actions led to further investigation and eventually his arrest.
The body's away from the house. I didn't want Tristan being exposed to all the blood and the bodies and the smell, so I attempted to put them in a van.
The boy, who had endured an unimaginable trauma, was later taken in by Megan's cousin and her family. Although he was so young, the memories of that day stayed with him. His story became a heartbreaking part of the case, adding to the tragedy that shook the community. Matos' shocking crimes left lasting scars on everyone involved, especially the young child who witnessed it all. During his trial, Adam Matos claimed he acted in self-defense, but the jury wasn't convinced by his explanation. His testimony, which lasted for hours, was all captured on camera and later featured in the What Lies Beneath series. Despite his defense, the jury carefully considered the evidence and found Matos guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. As the trial unfolded, it became clear that Matos' actions were both shocking and disturbing. His lack of remorse and the coldness he displayed throughout the proceedings made it hard for anyone to believe his claims of self-defense. The details of the case, including his treatment of his young son and the way he disposed of the bodies, left the jury with no doubt about his guilt.
Agonizing process for the victims' families. We spoke with the father of one of them as jurors handed down that verdict. He tells us he feels relief, whether there's a death penalty or not.
In the end, the jury sentenced Matos to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His conviction brought a sense of justice for the victims and their families, though nothing could undo the pain and trauma caused by his crimes. The story of Matos' actions remains a haunting reminder of the devastating impact of violence on innocent lives. Today, Adam Matos remains incarcerated at the Blackwater River Correctional Facility, serving his life sentence. Although he faced the possibility of the death penalty, he narrowly missed it, with one juror voting against it. As of 2018, he's 32 years old and continues to serve his sentence in Florida.
Decision of the jury, I sentence you in count 1 and count 4 to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This case left many shaken, especially considering the young child who witnessed the murders. The emotional toll on the family and the public has been immense. The fact that Matos managed to escape the death penalty only adds to the heartbreak, as the severity of his crime seems to warrant a much harsher punishment. The story is a chilling reminder of how far some individuals will go for selfish reasons and the lasting trauma they leave behind. Our next case takes us to South Africa, where former police officer Rosemary Ndlovu murdered her own relatives, all for insurance payouts. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was a respected police sergeant in South Africa. She rose from humble beginnings, leaving her home in Bushbuckridge to build a better future in Johannesburg. After joining the South African Police Service, or SAPS, she was stationed at the Tembisa police station. But beneath the uniform and badge, she concealed a chilling secret. She was a cold-blooded killer who murdered her own family for financial gain. Between 2012 and 2018, Ndlovu meticulously orchestrated the murders of 6 family members and her long-term partner. Her motive was chillingly simple. She wanted to collect life and funeral insurance payouts. Over the years, she pocketed approximately 1.4 million rand, or roughly $93,000, from these deaths, using the money to fuel her gambling addiction. Her killing spree began on March 2012 with her cousin, Madala Witness Homu, who was found beaten to death. His murder earned Ndlovu over 131,000 rand in insurance payouts. In June 2013, she poisoned and strangled her sister, Audrey, collecting more than 717,000 rand from various policies. That same month, her niece, Zanella Maltha, was brutally beaten to death, netting her an additional 119,840 rand. But Ndlovu wasn't finished. In October 2015, her boyfriend and the father of her child, Maurice Mabasa, was found in Olifantsfontein with 76 stab wounds. His murder brought her another 131,000 rand in insurance claims. 2 years later, in April 2017, her nephew, Mayani Mashaba, was murdered just a day after meeting with her. Her final known victim was Brilliant Mashego, her nephew and the son of her murdered sister, Audrey. He was last seen alive in her company on January 22, 2018. 2 days later, his body was found in Bushbuckridge. For 6 years, Ndlovu deceived investigators and insurance companies, but in 2018, her reign of terror came to an end when she took her crimes a step further. She attempted to hire hitmen to set her sister Joyce and her 5 children on fire inside their home. This time, however, the men she contacted were undercover police officers. During her trial, she broke down, realizing there was no escape. The officers had recorded her giving detailed instructions on the gruesome crime, sealing her fate. In 2021, Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu stood trial for her crimes. The evidence against her was overwhelming. She had targeted her own family, people who trusted and loved her, just for the sake of money. The court found her guilty of 6 murders, as well as charges of fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to 6 concurrent life terms for the murders, plus an additional 30 years for her crimes.
I accordingly impose the following sentence on accused. The accused is sentenced to life imprisonment on each count.
Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu's story is one of greed and betrayal. She saw her own family as nothing more than paychecks, leaving devastation in her wake. Families were torn apart, children lost their parents, and trust was shattered beyond repair. Her case is a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from those we trust the most. The next case proves obsession can destroy everything. Caitlin Armstrong took an innocent life, tried to vanish in Costa Rica, but the law caught up with her.
You're here for a warrant right now, I guess. Are you familiar with what you have going on?
I have no idea. You're in handcuffs in front of downtown Austin. It was incredibly...
On the night of May 11th, 2022, something terrible happened in Austin, Texas. Professional cyclist Anna Mariah Mo Wilson was discovered unresponsive in a friend's home. At first, no one knew who could have done such a thing, but soon all eyes turned to one person, Caitlin Marie Armstrong, a yoga instructor and real estate agent. Mo Wilson had traveled to Texas for a race in Hico. Hours before she was killed, she met up with her friend Strickland for a swim at Deep Eddy Pool and later had dinner. Afterward, Strickland dropped her off at her friend's house and left. That was the last time anyone saw Mo Wilson alive. Shortly before 10 p.m., Mo's friend came home and found her lying on the floor, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. She had been shot in the head and chest, and according to the autopsy, some of the shots were fired after she was already on the ground. At first, police had no suspects, but then security footage near the crime scene revealed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee arriving at Wilson's location moments before the murder. That Jeep belonged to Caitlin Armstrong. When questioned by police, Armstrong refused to answer. Instead, she rolled her eyes when asked about Strickland's relationship with Wilson. The police had their prime suspect, but due to a technical issue with an unrelated warrant, they had to let her go, and that's when she vanished. Armstrong knew the police were onto her, so she ran. Using her sister's passport, she fled to Costa Rica, where she tried to start a new life. She dyed her hair, cut it short, and even underwent plastic surgery to change her appearance. She told people she had been in a surfing accident to explain the bruising on her face.
Not knowing she'd probably been dead for 45 minutes. Then she runs to Costa Rica, had plastic surgery, on the beach teaching yoga, while the Wilsons are trying to pick up the pieces.
For 43 days, she managed to stay hidden. However, U.S. Marshals were determined to find her. They placed an ad on Facebook, looking for a yoga instructor in Costa Rica, and it worked. On June 29, 2022, they tracked her down at a hostel and arrested her. After being brought back to Texas, Armstrong pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Her trial was delayed multiple times, but finally, on October 30th, 2023, it began. While in jail awaiting trial, Armstrong made another desperate move. On October 12, 2023, she was taken to a medical appointment outside the jail. As officers led her back, she made a run for it. She didn't get far. After a short chase, she was caught and taken back into custody. Wilson's friend said, "I want you to know that I fought for Mo with everything that I had that night."
I want you to know that I fought for Mo with everything I had that night.
On November 16, 2023, after weeks of testimony, the jury found Caitlin Armstrong guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 90 years in prison. She'll be eligible for parole after 30 years, but many believe she will never walk free again. Mo Wilson's mother said to her daughter's killer in court, "You killed her earthly body, but her spirit is so very much alive, and you can never change that."
You killed her earthly body, but her spirit is so very much alive.
Wilson was a rising star in the cycling world, loved by many. Her life was taken away because of jealousy and obsession. Armstrong thought she could run from justice, but in the end, she couldn't escape the truth. Now, she'll spend the rest of her life behind bars, while the world remembers Mo Wilson not for how she died, but for how she lived. The next case proves the most dangerous place for some children is their own home. Elizabeth Escalona didn't just discipline her daughter, she tortured her.
You savagely beat your child to the edge of death. For this you must be punished.
On an unsuspecting day in 2011, something horrifying happened inside a Texas home. A 2-year-old girl was brutally treated by the person who was supposed to love and protect her, her mother, Elizabeth Escalona. Elizabeth was just 23 years old at the time. She had 3 children, but being a mother didn't stop her from making terrible choices. She struggled with substances, had a history of mistreatment, and often lost her temper. But no one could have imagined the cruelty she would unleash on her little daughter over something as simple as learning to use the bathroom. That day, Elizabeth became frustrated with her daughter for not using the bathroom correctly. Instead of helping or teaching her, she snapped. She treated the little girl very badly, pushing her and using a milk jug in a hurtful way. And as if that wasn't enough, she did something very upsetting. She stuck the toddler's hands to the wall with glue. By the time emergency responders arrived, the child was barely alive. She had been treated so harshly that she became very ill and unconscious. When the case went to trial, the courtroom was filled with heartache. Prosecutors showed disturbing pictures of the little girl's injuries. They turned to Elizabeth and asked her if she was a monster. With tears in her eyes, she nodded and whispered yes. But no amount of regret could undo what she had done. The judge, Larry Mitchell, listened to the painful testimonies and made his decision. He told her, "You savagely beat your child to the edge of death." During the trial, Elizabeth begged for mercy. She claimed that she had suffered mistreatment as a child and didn't know what she was doing. But the prosecutors weren't convinced. They pointed out that she had been using substances since she was 13, even while pregnant, and continued to drink and do substances while out on bond for a previous felony.
Counsel, is there any reason in law why sentence should not be pronounced at this time?
The judge sentenced her to 99 years in prison as soon as the verdict was read. She starts screaming. Her sentencing was harsh, but many believed it was fair. Her children are now in the custody of the state, safe from harm.
You guilty of the offense charged. I'll set your sentence at confinement in the penitentiary for a period of 99 years.
This case stunned the masses. How could a mother do something so cruel to her child? It was a reminder of how important it is to protect children from mistreatment. Thankfully, this little girl survived. But the scars, both physical and emotional, will remain for a lifetime.
A child who never developed, who never had a childhood. So no, she's not able.
Our next case reveals a crime that shook an entire household. Damian Lang killed his own parents, leaving the community stunned by such brutality.
His internal life is going to be way worse than whatever he will deal with in this lifetime. I didn't attend any of the court hearings. I couldn't bear to watch what my grandson endured before he was shot.
On November 11th, 2022, 21-year-old Bryce Salter spent his evening at Y Bar and Bistro in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was supposed to be just another night out, but when the evening came to an end, Bryce never made his way home. Hours passed and his family grew concerned. They didn't know that something terrible had happened outside the bar that night. Based on the information the press could gather, authorities were soon involved, and an investigation began into what had taken place. Bryce Salter was a young man full of life, known for his love of sports and fishing. He had a smile that could light up a room, according to his grandmother, Brenda Miles. But in just moments, his life was stolen by Lang, a man who had spent most of his adult life in and out of prison. Lang had been out of prison for only a few months when he managed to obtain a stolen gun. On that tragic night, he used it to take Bryce's life. The murder was brutal and completely unprovoked. He tragically shot and killed Salter. Surveillance footage revealed that Lang approached his car, where he encountered Salter. An argument ensued, during which Lang pointed a gun at Salter's chest, knocking him to the ground. Salter attempted to defend himself, but Lang fired multiple shots, resulting in Salter's death. Bryce's father, Brandon Salter, and other family members struggled to comprehend how someone could be so cruel. But what made the case even more disturbing was Lang's behavior during the trial.
Surveillance video shows the two men arguing when Lang took out a gun and knocked Salter to the ground. Salter fought back, but then Lang shot him.
Lang showed no shame for what he had done. During his sentencing hearing, he laughed as Bryce's family members delivered emotional victim impact statements. He mocked their pain, slumped in his chair, and smirked while Bryce's younger sister, Reese, spoke about how much her brother meant to her. Even after receiving his sentence, a minimum of 100 years in prison, Lang continued to smile. His attitude throughout the trial shocked not only Bryce's family but also the judge, who called Lange's actions senseless, cowardly, and merciless. Despite Lange's disturbing behavior, justice was served. The court handed him a sentence that ensured he would never walk free again. In addition to the 100-year sentence for second-degree murder, Lange received additional time for weapons charges. As the judge announced the verdict, the Salter family clapped with joy as Lange was sentenced.
70 years to a maximum of 100 years. Thank you.
As bailiffs dragged Lange out of the courtroom for his aggressive outbursts, one of Bryce's family members shouted, "How does it feel to know you're going to die in prison?" It was a powerful moment, one that brought a sense of closure to those who had suffered so much. Bryce's father, Brandon, called his son magic and said he had the perfect blend of everything: intelligence, kindness, and charm. His loss left a hole in their hearts that could never be filled. Bryce's sister Reese found the trial to be one of the hardest experiences of her life. Hearing the details of her brother's final moments was devastating, but seeing Lange mock their pain was even worse. In the end, the Salter family found some comfort in knowing that Lange would never harm another person again. While their pain will never fully fade, they could finally say that justice had been served for Bryce. Our next case turned Colorado highways into a war zone. Ryan Stone led police on a high-speed chase, carjacking multiple vehicles and leaving innocent people badly injured.
My lawyer told me I made the news in the UK and Australia. If you type in Grand Theft Auto on YouTube, my comes up first.
On a seemingly ordinary morning in March 2014, chaos erupted across multiple cities in Colorado. It all started when 28-year-old Ryan Cole Stone made a reckless decision that would endanger countless lives. What began as a car theft soon turned into a dangerous high-speed chase that stretched across several counties. His actions left a trail of destruction, injuries, and fear. It all started outside a gas station in Longmont. A Ford Focus sat running, unattended, for just a moment. That moment was all Stone needed. Without thinking twice, he jumped into the driver's seat and sped away. But there was something he hadn't expected. A 4-year-old child was still in the car. Instead of stopping, Stone continued his reckless escape. He drove at dangerously high speeds down the highway, weaving in and out of traffic. Before police officers closed in on him, Stone made a shocking move. He crashed the Ford into a minivan on Interstate 76, forcing it to stop, but he didn't stop there. He dragged the driver out of the van by her legs, leaving her helpless on the side of the road. Then he took off in the stolen minivan, continuing his reckless escape.
That since 2003, there's not been a minute of his life where he wasn't on bond, in jail or prison, or on some type of probation.
As he sped through Aurora on the E470 toll road, he caused even more destruction. Near Chambers Road, he hit a state trooper, breaking the officer's leg. But even that didn't slow him down. Stone kept going, crashing into multiple vehicles along the way, his selfish actions putting everyone around him at risk. After 90 minutes of utter mayhem, Stone ultimately exhausted all possible escape routes. He crashed one final time before abandoning the stolen vehicle. Attempting to flee on foot, he quickly realized it was futile. Law enforcement officers from 12 different agencies had been relentlessly pursuing him. Near the intersection of Lincoln Avenue and Peoria Street, Douglas County Sheriff's deputies closed in and apprehended him. His high-speed crime spree had finally come to an end. Stone was arrested and faced serious charges. He was convicted of attempted manslaughter, assault, child maltreatment, and car theft. In court, prosecutors revealed chilling details about his mindset, revealing that he saw his crimes as nothing more than a twisted game. Witness testimonies and evidence showed that he had been obsessed with violent video games, to the point where he began blurring the lines between fiction and reality. While in jail, Stone bragged that he was trying to mimic a video game. He saw it all as a game, but for the innocent people he put in danger, it was real life.
The things where you say over and over and over and over how you wish that you could sit with every single family and tell them how horrible this felt.
The judge didn't take his crimes lightly. Stone was sentenced to 160 years in prison, a sentence that ensured he would never threaten the safety of innocent people again. However, he has no shame for what he did.
DA Mark Horbert described it, the joint prosecution squad between the Boulder and Douglas County DA's offices, with Douglas taking the lead.
You've just witnessed 68 of the wildest, most unforgettable courtroom sentences ever handed down.